A frightening call received to 911 reported a terrible crime that had occurred in the Eckerd family living in the state of Florida, United States. The love between two brothers was destroyed overnight due to jealousy over loving the same girl. Sean Paul Eckerd was born on October 12, 1990, in the small town located in San Diego County, California. His parents were Donna and Samuel Eckerd. He also had a brother, Stanley Elias Eckerd, who was 2 years older than Sean. Donna and Samuel had a total of 6 other children from previous relationships, but the media only mentioned the names of Jennifer. These children lived separately from the family on the other coast of the USA, in Florida. The Eckerd family settled in San Diego in a rented house, where Sean and Stanley spent their childhood. The boys grew up in love and care. It seemed their upbringing was calm and completely normal. Sean had charisma from child and was always very generous. With these qualities, he managed to win people over in their environment, practically making them fall in love with him. For Donna, in particular, Sean became a breath of fresh air in the family, and perhaps it was because of this that her affection for him was so noticeable. Due to the busy schedules of their parents, especially their mother, who was involved in work and church activities, Sean and Stanley were often left alone at home. The relationship between the two brothers was generally harmonious, although it was naturally not without episodes of quarrels, as often happens in family relationships. For example, it was common for Stanley, as the older brother, to make fun of Sean. Disagreements and disputes would often arise from this. As Sean grew up, he displayed a sociable and cheerful character, which contrasted with the calm demeanor of his parents. The Eckerd family did not communicate much with their neighbors and rarely made acquaintances. However, as Sean matured, everything changed. He managed to establish good relationships with everyone around him. At some point, this ability helped him become friends with their neighbor, Mary, who was from Torrance, located in Los Angeles County. She was a single mother of 2 children. Mary loved animals. She kept many different animals at her house, including horses, chickens, and sheep. The animals caught Sean's attention, leading him to visit her house frequently to help care for them. Sean began to spend more and more time at Mary's house, playing with her family, and he even became friends with her children. Over time, her house became a second home for Sean, especially during the times when his parents were not present or communicating much with him. Mary spoiled him and especially enjoyed having him around. At some point, he seemed to have become her child. Sean, Mary, and her children often went for walks to the observation decks of San Diego, just to admire the valley, which was one of Sean's favorite activities. However, in 2005, when Sean was 15 years old and had finished high school, he learned that the house where his family lived would be sold. When Sean found out that the house they were renting was going to be sold, he was heartbroken. He didn't want to move at all. The family had tried to find a place to rent in the area, but they couldn't find anything that fit their budget. His grandmother lived in Florida, and she had a house that she said they could live in if they moved there. So the family decided to move. Sean asked if he could stay with Mary, but his parents loved him so much they wanted him to stay with them. Mary remembers him crying when he arrived on the day he had to leave. The move occurred in August 2005. The family now lived in Spring Hill, Florida, in a house with a huge garden in the backyard. Both brothers enrolled in the local high school. Sean and Stanley adapted easily to the new environment, making friends both with their neighbors and classmates. Among their new friends, Samantha, a local teenage girl who quickly became friends with the brothers. Despite their busy new lives, Sean still missed Mary and her family. They kept in touch daily, calling each other to arrange meetings, leading Sean to dream that immediately after finishing school, he would return to California and continue living with them. In May 2006, Stanley revealed some news to their parents that left them utterly amazed. He announced that he was going to drop out of school. Stanley said that he wanted to devote more time to his hobby of studying martial arts and collecting swords. However, in reality, his desire to drop out was also influenced by the bad company he had fallen into. These unfavorable connections eventually led to his arrest in 2007 on charges of committing serious crimes related to fraud. However, later on, Stanley managed to get away with it. One of the neighbors knew Stanley, described him as a cheerful guy but called him a liar and a thief with obsessive thoughts, stating that he lied only to feel better. One of the Eckerd children described Stanley as a talented musician with a high intellect. Perhaps because of his rich vocabulary, the other kids considered him arrogant because they simply did not understand him. She said that people with high IQs often seem a little strange to others. She insisted that her brother was a good person. At the end of the same summer, Sean also approached their parents with troubling news, announcing his desire to drop out of school. Samuel and Donna feared a similar outcome, believing that Sean could follow the same crooked path as his older brother. However, Sean was not inclined to get into trouble. Instead, he soon got a job and joined the service team at a restaurant chain. Unfortunately, Sean often fell ill, which drove him to despair. He was forced to miss shifts at work, and soon he had to quit his job. Eventually, it turned out that he was suffering from encephalitis. Then, Sean even fell into a coma that lasted for 40 days. As his sister recounted, the doctors who treated him in Tampa said he had white lesions on his brain and considered his survival unlikely. His parents did not want to give up and insisted that Sean might wake up. Fortunately for them, it happened. When Sean finally awoke, he was in a deplorable state. He had lost about 20 kilograms and was greatly weakened. He had to undergo long-term therapy. During this difficult process, the Eckerd family was by his side. Donna, Samuel, and Stanley gave him unwavering support. Thanks in many ways to their efforts, Sean managed to fully rehabilitate and regain his health. Undoubtedly, such problems with their son affected Donna deeply. She experienced so much stress and suffering that she eventually developed heart problems. Sean, after going through this ordeal, wanted to return to school. Some of his friends and family members noted that he seemed to have begun to treat life more sensibly and appreciated every moment. Being in this mental state, in the summer of 2009, Sean decided that he was ready to go to California and reunite with Mary, his second family. He was greeted with great joy, which led Sean to tell Mary about his aspirations and plans for the future. Sean also shared his dream of becoming a physical therapist but noted that he would need money to make his dream come true. Sean and Mary were determined to figure it out, so they started looking for loans and grants. By this time, Sean took for granted that the right thing to do was to stick to his original plan of moving to California, and he told his mother about it. However, she felt that now was not the best time to let her son go, especially after all the suffering he had endured. Donna believed he would not be able to get proper medical care there. That with his parents, he had everything he needed to live, so she asked Sean to stay. It was an unpleasant decision for Sean, but he listened to his mother. Before parting from Mary, he promised them that he would return the following summer. At the same time in Florida, both brothers gradually began to warm up to Samantha, their mutual new friend. In early May 2010, Stanley and Sean exchanged text messages with her. However, it was Stanley who eventually took the initiative and asked her out. Samantha happily accepted, and they spent a wonderful evening together. At the end of the evening, they drove back together, and just before saying goodbye, they kissed. Stanley took this as a sign that they were now in a relationship and informed everyone he knew about it. However, it turned out that this was not the case. After their date, Samantha realized that she liked his brother Sean, and after a few days, she began dating Sean. It should be noted that both Sean and Samantha informed Stanley about their relationship. For Stanley, this news was shocking, and of course, the relationship between the brothers deteriorated sharply. It got to the point where they were arguing emotionally even in front of their parents. Because of this, Samantha and Sean pretended to break off their relationship, started keeping it a secret. However, this led to false hope for Stanley. Blinded by jealousy, Stanley warned Samantha not to trust Sean, claiming that Sean only wanted to play with her feelings. On June 17, 2010, while Sean and Stanley were helping their brother, Sean confessed that his relationship with Samantha was ongoing and that his intentions were serious. Stanley pretended that this news did not matter to him. However, deep down, he felt an intensely strong anger flare up inside him. The next day, without considering what Stanley might think or do, Sean made plans for a date with Samantha. Early Saturday morning, June 19, 2010, they said their goodbyes and went home. Sean immediately returned to his room and locked the door, planning to rest. However, Stanley had completely different plans. He quietly crept up to the door and opened it, bringing a rope with him. At first, the brothers just started arguing, but very soon their conversation escalated into a loud argument about courting Samantha. Suddenly, they attacked each other, and the fight took an unusual turn when Stanley threw a rope around Sean's neck. According to a later account, Stanley stated that at some point, they just fell to the floor, and Sean received a fatal blow to the neck. In horror, Stanley approached him and suddenly felt that the body of his younger brother was slowly freezing. Eventually, Sean's heart stopped, and he breathed his last in Stanley's arms. In a state of shock, Stanley began to deny what was happening. He placed Sean's body on the bed and started questioning how they had come to this tragic outcome. At that moment, Stanley could think of nothing better than to dig a grave in their garden with his own hands. Once he completed this task, he pulled his brother's body out of the window and lowered it into the hole. At the moment he began to bury Sean, their mother, Donna, woke up and strange muffled sounds outside the house attracted her attention. Noticing her son, she asked what he was doing. Stanley replied that he was simply burying some of Samantha's things because he didn't want them to continue reminding him of her. Donna was satisfied with this answer and left, allowing Stanley to continue with his terrible plan. He successfully completed the burial and devised a plan. He intended to dig up and bring Sean's body away in 2 weeks when his parents left home. Afterward, Stanley went to Sean's room and took Sean's phone to message Samantha while impersonating him. He claimed that Sean wanted to break off the relationship. Around 9:30 a.m., when Samantha woke up and saw these messages, she didn't know what to think or feel. Considering the previous evening, such words from Sean seemed absurd. Shortly after that, Stanley texted Samantha from Stanley's phone and asked her to call him back. He tried to convince her that Sean had packed his things and left for California. Before ending the conversation, Stanley added that things were calmer at home now. That same day, Samantha visited the Eckert house to collect some of her belongings. Offering to give her a lift, Stanley confessed that he still loved her and expressed hope that with Sean's departure, they could try to start anew. On Sunday, June 20th, 2010, Donna celebrated her birthday, coinciding with her father's celebration. Deciding not to miss the opportunity, they organized a party to celebrate both occasions. However, without Sean, it felt as though they could not enjoy the day. They tried calling him many times, but to no avail. At some point, Sean finally responded, but only through a text message. This was completely uncharacteristic of him, as he had never ignored his parents' calls before, prompting them to realize that something was wrong and fear that something terrible had happened to their son. On June 21st, 2010, Jennifer went to her parents' house to check for any news about Sean's whereabouts. During a conversation between Jennifer and Donna, Donna mentioned the strange pit that Stanley had dug the day before. "I don't quite understand, will this make any sense?" Jennifer asked. She then urged their father to inspect the hole. As soon as they began digging, he fell onto his son's arms and legs. Panicking, he screamed in horror and quickly pieced together the grim reality. Jennifer dialed emergency services, but her voice was so broken that the dispatcher struggled to understand the situation. Meanwhile, Samuel was screaming non-stop, making it difficult for the dispatcher to grasp what was happening. At this time, Donna ran to Stanley's room to find out what had happened. She found her son sitting on the floor, sobbing and asking for forgiveness while claiming it was an accident. Meanwhile, Jennifer begged emergency services to send the police, fearing that Stanley might attack the rest of the family. After a harrowing 7-minute call, the police finally arrived at the Eckert house. There, they found Samuel kneeling in front of the hole, digging with his hands and trying to pull Sean's body out by his arms. An officer ordered him to stop, but he did not comply. The police had to forcibly lead the grieving father away. A few minutes later, Donna emerged from the room with Stanley. He was arrested on the scene and taken for questioning. During his interrogation, Stanley changed his account of events several times. Initially, he claimed that his brother was addicted to illegal substances and deep in debt. Then, one day, when he went into his room, he saw Sean attempting to end one's own life. Stanley asserted that he tried to stop Sean from what he had planned, but his efforts were in vain. He tried to convince the police that he hid his brother's body because he wanted to spare his mother the enormous pain of loss. After 2 hours of interrogation, under pressure from the police, Stanley finally admitted what truly happened and disclosed that the reason for the quarrel was Samantha, at 10:30 p.m. on the same Monday. Stanley was taken to Hernando County Jail to be held without bail on a charge of second-degree murder. 2 days later, the forensic experts performed an autopsy on Sean's body and presented the forensic analysis results to the court. The report stated that Sean had visible bruises in the muscles under the skin of his neck, which clearly indicated that the area had been compressed, making breathing difficult. The examination concluded that death was caused by traumatic brain injury and neck trauma. To determine whether the case warranted first or second-degree charges, Deputy State's Attorney began a thorough review of the case's circumstances. A first-degree charge would mean that Stanley could face the death penalty. On February 25, 2011, the first hearing was held before District Judge. In the second row of the courtroom were Samuel and Donna, who were clearly shocked by what was happening. Although prosecutor insisted on a first-degree charge, he confirmed that he would not seek the death penalty. Immediately after Judge announced that the hearing would be adjourned, Stanley, pale and handcuffed, made a calming gesture toward his parents. They were both sobbing. In the end, Stanley was charged with first-degree murder, but he was offered a plea deal. If he pleaded guilty, he would spend no more than 20 years in prison. To everyone's surprise, Stanley chose to stand trial, essentially giving up the opportunity to go free. The trial began on April 9, 2013. The defense was led by attorney Alan Fanter, while prosecutor Pete Magrino remained in charge of the prosecution. The main goal of the prosecution was to convince the jury that the defendant had carefully planned the crime. During the discussion of arguments, prosecutor Pete addressed Stanley directly. However, Stanley maintained remarkable composure and did not admit to what Pete was trying to elicit. The prosecutor then announced to everyone present that the motive for the crime was Stanley's jealousy and that everything pointed to premeditated actions on his part. In response, attorney Allen argued that it was a spontaneous fight that led to a tragic accident. He emphasized that despite Stanley's obviously unsuccessful attempt to cover up the evidence of the crime, he was motivated by good intentions, trying to protect his mother. Allen appealed to the jury not to let Stanley's attempt to cover up the crime cloud the true essence of the events. After hearing the testimonies, the jury, consisting of 9 women and 3 men, deliberated for 2 hours on April 12, 2013, and concluded that the crime was not premeditated. Consequently, they found Stanley guilty of second-degree murder. Despite efforts by Donna and Samuel to obtain a new trial, they were not granted this opportunity. During the final hearing held a month later, on May 13, 2013, emotions overwhelmed both parents. Through tears, they begged Judge to reconsider the case, with Donna recounting the defense arguments. The judge tried to calm them down, noting that no parent should have to endure what they were experiencing. However, he concluded that the crime was too serious and the perpetrator had to be punished. Therefore, Judge sentenced Stanley to 50 years in prison without possibility of parole. In turn, Stanley publicly apologized to his family and confessed to his actions. He admitted that he would never be able to atone for his guilt. From California, Mary watched the trial with a broken heart. Looking at the valleys of San Diego, she remembered the wonderful time spent together with Sean and felt profound sadness, realizing how lucky she had been to meet such a remarkable man. The tragic saga of the Eckerd family serves as a haunting reminder of how jealousy and unchecked emotions can shatter familial bonds and lead to irreversible consequences. Sean Paul Eckerd's vibrant life, marked by charisma and dreams of a brighter future, was cut short by his brother Stanley's act of violence, leaving a community in shock and a family in perpetual grief. The courtroom's verdict, while delivering justice, could not mend the wounds inflicted on Donna, Samuel, and their loved ones. They almost lost both of their sons. Welcome back to our channel. Today we will explore a new case. The case of Jorge Torres. Is there anything more horrific than a father murdering his own child? In the investigation and trial of crimes, mistakes in identifying the culprit can have dire consequences. One of the most heartbreaking situations is when an innocent person is wrongfully punished while the real culprit continues to be at large. This was on Mother's Day, when 8-year-old Laura Hobbs and her best friend, 9-year-old Crystal Tobias, decided to go for a short bike ride. They were expected to return within an hour, but vanished without a trace. Family members spent nearly the entire night looking for them. In the early morning, Laura's father, Jerry Hobbs, found her bike while climbing the hill, but Laura was still missing. The search for she and her friend continued. A couple of hours later, a few hundred meters from the bike, Jerry discovers suspicious figures lying motionless on the ground in the dim light of early morning. He quickly realized something was wrong. When they reached the scene, he discovered the bodies of Laura and her best friend Crystal, who had multiple stab wounds. It was clear that their deaths were brutal and prolonged. Sadly, this tragedy happened close to their home. Both girls lived in the small town of Xene, Illinois, which has a population of 20,000. Their deaths deeply affected the local community, sparking a desire among residents to uncover the truth and the cruel criminal responsible. However, it's difficult to uncover the full story. The police came under intense public pressure. So, they worked hard to gather any information that could help them inform the community and capture the perpetrator. A few days after the tragedy, the commander of the task force at the Lake County Major Crimes Department confirmed that has a suspect. Detectives had already spoken with Jerry. They think he is involved in the case. He was brought in for questioning on the day the bodies were discovered. The police noted that Jerry had been acting strangely. A background check revealed that he had been released from a Texas prison just a month prior. Overall, he had a significant history of legal troubles. Although Jerry had repaired his relationship with his daughter, could he handle the situation involving her and her friend? The girls were discovered lying next to each other, having been raped. The scene was horrific. Both had suffered multiple stab wounds and had been beaten. A forensic expert identified a total of 31 cuts from a blade, primarily on the upper body, chest, and neck. The injuries were similar for both girls. Laura had defensive wounds, suggesting she fought back in desperation. There was reason to believe that the killer intentionally caused maximum pain to his victims, targeting areas that would prolong suffering rather than lead to immediate death. Jerry firmly denied any wrongdoing. Consequently, he was questioned for hours by law enforcement officers who sought to piece together the events leading to the deaths of the two victims. After a lengthy interrogation, the detectives managed to obtain a confession, which was captured on video. Jerry said he and his wife Sheila returned home on Sunday around 3 o'clock. At that time, their 4 children were flying kites by the lake. Their daughter Laura asked her parents if she could go for a bike ride with a friend, mentioning that it was Mother's Day and she wanted to celebrate it with a festive ride. Even though Laura was still under house arrest for taking $40 from Jerry, Sheila chose to let her go. Jerry disagreed with Sheila, believing that Laura should complete her punishment to understand her mistake. However, Sheila convinced him, and Jerry decided not to interfere, he wanting to ensure that both Laura and Sheila had a nice Mother's Day. Laura was allowed to go for a walk and was expected to return in an hour. However, she did not come back on time. Initially, her parents thought she and her friends had lost track of time while enjoying themselves and would return soon. But as evening approached and Laura still hadn't arrived home, their concern grew. The path through the park was short, and it usually took about 20 minutes to walk. Given that she had been gone for several hours, her absence became increasingly worrying. Jerry decided to investigate. He planned to search for his daughter along the path and intended to discipline her for disobeying, so he set off down a dirt road. Jerry encountered Laura and Crystal, who were playing and ignoring their parents' requests. Upset, Jerry insisted it was time for his daughter to go home and said he would punish her. He wanted to take Laura home and told Crystal to go back as well since her parents were waiting for her. However, neither girl was willing to leave on their own. Jerry then turned to Laura and said they were leaving because she was too caught up in her play. Laura reacted by getting upset, and Jerry grabbed her hand. She resisted and screamed to be let go. Crystal also pleaded with him to release her friend and leave them alone. Both girls started to be disrespectful and rude to Jerry. When Jerry refused to let go of Laura's hand, Crystal pulled out a small switchblade and insisted that he release her. In a moment of confusion, Laura bit her father's hand, which made him angry. He struck her in the face, causing her to fall to the ground. Crystal then lunged at him, but he easily took the knife away from her. Once he had control, he hit Crystal in the face, and she also fell. Furious, Crystal stood up and attacked Jerry, but he responded by stabbing her in the chest several times. Afterward, he approached Laura, who was desperately trying to defend herself, but she was no match for him. He struck her in the face again, and then stabbed her multiple times with the knife. Jerry's statements were collected after 24 hours of interrogation. The police believed they had caught the real criminal. He detailed the brutal aspects of the attack, information only the perpetrator would know. Despite his confession, it was hard to accept that a father could harm his own daughter and her friend so viciously. The detectives were particularly suspicious due to Jerry's criminal history. Born in 1970, Jerry Hobbs dropped out of school after 8th grade. He was known for his hot temper, which often led him into trouble. His criminal career began soon after school, with significant offenses occurring in 1990, when he first served several months in a Texas state prison. After that point, he was released but then re-imprisoned, typically for petty offenses. The list of criminal activities included possession of illegal substances and multiple assaults on individuals for theft. There were serious underlying issues that contributed to these crimes. In August 2001, Jerry attacked his wife while they were living in a trailer. The situation escalated into physical violence. 3 neighbors attempted to intervene, but Jerry, in a fit of rage, grabbed a chainsaw and chased them around the trailer park. He only stopped when one of the men struck him in the back with a shovel, causing him to fall and become incapacitated. By that time, the police had been called, and they arrived shortly after to take control of the situation. In December 2002, he was convicted and received a suspended sentence. However, he failed to report to his probation officer, leading to the revocation of his probation. In October 2003, he was sent to prison, where he served 18 months. He was finally released in April 2005. After his release, he took a bus to Zane. He visited Sheila's parents' house, where he reunited with Sheila and their 4 children. Laura and her 2 brothers were from Jerry's relationship with Sheila, while her eldest child was from her previous marriage. Jerry put aside past grievances and hoped to rebuild their relationship and live together as a family again. Jerry spent a lot of time reflecting over the past year and a half, dreaming of starting a new life. Despite the challenges in their relationship, Sheila genuinely loved Jerry, and they decided to give their relationship another chance. Unfortunately, their efforts were in vain. Just a month after they reunited, a tragic incident occurred. One day began positively, with children riding bicycles and roller skates along the forest path. Many families were having barbecues, making the area lively and seemingly safe. There had never been any incidents in the past, and parents often allowed their children to explore on their own. It was puzzling that no one seemed to have heard anything. There were no witnesses to the double murder. After Jerry confessed, the police arrested him, and he was held in custody without bail for over 2 years while the prosecution prepared for trial. During the investigation, several strange inconsistencies came to light. Investigative agency found it hard to believe that the 8- and 9-year-old girls had a knife and attacked him, prompting him to fight back and ultimately kill them in a moment of anger. Additionally, it was odd that the girls refused to go home after their father found them walking alone in the dark. Were the schoolgirls really not afraid to be outside at that hour? All of this seemed absurd. In his confession, Jerry did not mention anything about rape, even though the girls had experienced sexual violence at the crime scene. Forensic evidence later uncovered more details about the terrible events that occurred that day. Scientists found male DNA samples, but these did not match Jerry. Instead, they belonged to an unidentified man. Despite this evidence, investigators proposed their own explanation. However, they did not explain how male DNA could be found on the girls, making their reasoning seem even more questionable. The charges indicate that it was a serious case. They had Jerry's confession and his criminal background, so winning in court seemed like a formality. Details about the DNA evidence were not revealed. The video recordings of the interrogations were sufficient to persuade the jury. As a result, Laura's father was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In 2009, a significant change occurred in Arlington, Virginia. Amanda Snell, a 20-year-old servicewoman, lived there. On July 13, 2009, she failed to report for her shift at Fort Myer, raising concerns among her supervisors. Amanda was typically responsible and committed to her career, so not showing up for duty without notice was out of character for her. To check on her well-being, management sent several colleagues to her dormitory. They knocked on her door, rang the doorbell, and attempted to reach her by phone, but received no response. When they found her door unlocked, they entered the room. The first alarming sign was that her wallet and ID were untouched. The military quickly discovered blood and signs of a robbery in the bedroom. Amanda's body was found in the closet. She had been severely beaten, and a cord from a household appliance was still tied around her neck, with a pillowcase over her head. Investigators determined that she had died about 2 days before her body was discovered. Numerous pieces of evidence were collected from the crime scene, including a sample of the pillowcase. The police noted that her laptop, phone, and bed sheets were missing, and they found several footprints in the room, suggesting that another person had been present. Since the base was secured against outsiders, this indicated that the perpetrator likely lived or worked there. Forensic experts identified the shoe prints as Nike Air Force One, which were very popular on the base at the time, providing no leads for the police in their search for the suspect. Months went by. On February 27, 2010, another attack occurred just 5 kilometers from Amanda's workplace in Arlington. In the early hours of the morning, 2 female postgraduate students were returning from dinner when a man confronted them at the entrance of their building. He threatened them with a weapon, forced them inside, and followed them with his gun drawn. He bound their hands with electrical cords and ordered one of them to get into his car. He then drove her to a remote area outside the city, where he raped her. The attacker strangled her until she lost consciousness and left her to die in a wooded area covered in snow, not considering that she might survive the assault. The girl regained her senses and made her way to the nearest road, where a motorist found her and offered help. He stopped and called emergency services. The student, suffering from hypothermia, was taken to the hospital. Meanwhile, her friend had also contacted the authorities. Fortunately, they did not find any immediate danger. After being discharged, she spoke with the police and provided valuable information to the investigators. The most significant breakthrough was her detailed description of the attacker and his car. She described him as a short, smooth-skinned Hispanic man who drove a silver car. Detectives quickly recognized that the handwriting matched that of the criminal who attacked Amanda. Additionally, the police had obtained DNA from the person who attempted to take the girl's life. That her miraculous rescue would set off a series of events that would significantly impact many lives. Later that evening, officers collected a DNA sample from Amanda's. In the car described by the girl, they discovered the university ID of the kidnapped girl along with her earring, which helped establish a connection between the main suspect and the attack. The main suspect has since been taken into custody while awaiting trial. Several months went by as the police worked to understand the details of these disturbing events. Eventually, the DNA sample was analyzed and matched with the National Criminal Database. Law enforcement officials were taken aback by an unexpected discovery. The DNA found on the bodies of Laura and Crystal, who were murdered in 2005 in Zane, matched that of this suspect. At the time of the girls' murders, the suspect, Jorge Torres, was just 16 years old and lived in Zane. The police were further shocked to find out that he was a friend of Crystal's older brother. This investigation into the brutal attack revealed a shocking miscarriage of justice. Jerry, the father of Laura, was wrongfully imprisoned for a crime he did not commit. After spending many years in prison, Jerry began to show significant changes in his behavior. 2 weeks after DNA evidence linked Jorge to the crime, police identified the true killer of the two schoolgirls. The charges against Jerry were dropped, and he was released from prison in early August 2010. After the murders of the schoolgirls, Jorge was not apprehended and graduated from high school in 2006. Just a few months later, he enlisted in the Marines. The investigation revealed then he had boasted about being part of the Marines, an important unit of the U.S. Armed Forces. But this did not help his criminal image. He remained a ruthless monster and continued his violent actions. Now, it was necessary to examine his potential involvement in other attacks. When in prison, Jorge was still scheming and manipulating events. But the manipulative tactics Jorge used could no longer be hidden. Alongside the DNA testing, additional evidence was necessary to prove his involvement in the murder of the schoolgirls. To gather this evidence, authorities decided to recruit informants from among the prisoners in exchange for reduced sentences. A suitable informant was chosen. He was a former restaurant owner convicted of financial crimes and had no prior violent crime record. He willingly agreed to cooperate with the police. During a week in August 2010, he was approached to communicate with Jorge. This person said, in his confession, Jorge stated that he entered Amanda's apartment in the early morning with the intention of robbing and assaulting her. When Amanda woke up and saw him, he took advantage of her shock, tying her hands with a wire and wrapping a cord around her neck because he feared she would recognize him and report him to the police. Jorge claimed that she had no time to fight back. He coldly detailed how he assaulted Amanda while she was suffering, and then concealed her body in a closet to delay its discovery. The informant reported that Jorge spoke about his actions with a sense of pride, almost bragging, making law enforcement officers were shocked. Jorge's behavior indicated possible psychopathic traits, as individuals with such disorders often seek admiration. Following this confession, the police chose to reopen Amanda's case. They discovered that Jorge was a colleague of Amanda and lived directly across the hall from her. In his room, officers found a gun and a computer containing numerous graphic videos of the rape and torture of women. Additionally, Jorge was wearing Nike Air Force One sneakers that matched the shoe prints at the scene of Amanda's murder. Forensic scientists started re-examining samples from the pillowcase found on Amanda's head and from the bedsheet. DNA testing eventually revealed a match, adding one more victim to the list of crimes linked to this dangerous criminal. Although detectives believed he might be involved in other similar offenses, they found no evidence to support this. The police were left with a serious threat to society who had been free for years. It was finally time to pursue justice. The trial of the case in which the graduate student victim survived the attack began in December 2010. The defendant was found guilty of several charges, including kidnapping, rape, and attempted first-degree murder, and was sentenced to life in prison. This was just the beginning of multiple trials. The trial for the murder of Amanda Snell began in 2014, after prosecutors presented Jorge's recorded confession and DNA evidence. The jury unanimously supported the prosecution. In late May of that year, the judge sentenced Jorge to death. In mid-November, he was extradited to Lake County, Illinois, to face trial for the murders of Laura and Crystal. Although the attacker had already been sentenced to death, the state attorney believed it was essential to conduct hearings to honor the victims and their families. The trial started in mid-September 2018. Jorge opted for a plea deal, giving up his right to a trial and admitting to the intentional murders of 2 schoolgirls. He received a 50-year prison sentence for each murder, but his life sentence was already revoked. He returned to a Virginia prison to await the death penalty while his appeals were under review. The death penalty was abolished in the state in 2021, so Jorge is now serving a life sentence without the possibility of parole. One key question remains: why would the biological father of one of the murdered schoolgirls take the blame for this terrible crime? In 2005, Jerry briefly explained his reasoning to his mother, stating that he had been broken by the police during interrogation. Later, after his release, he shared more details with journalists. He revealed that he had not slept for over a day and was actively searching for his daughter with Crystal's father when he learned of her death. Overwhelmed by shock, he was confused and in pain, and the police exploited this vulnerability during the lengthy interrogation to extract his shocking confession. Human rights activists claim that Jerry faced constant pressure from law enforcement, who used various tactics to force him into a confession. As a result of their actions, Jerry lost 5 years of his life in prison. After these events, the man decided to seek compensation for moral damages because he now knows that the police deliberately ignored the most valuable evidence that confirmed his innocence and locked him up instead of looking for the real killer. DNA samples obtained after the rape clearly showed that Jerry was not involved in the crime, yet law enforcement chose not to pursue the real culprit and continued to charge him. Now, it took multiple crimes being committed for the truth to finally come to light and for an innocent man to be set free. During the recent press conference regarding this incident, the state attorney addressed the media. He made efforts to downplay the situation and stressed that no one obstructed the detainees' access to legal counsel. He claimed that the detainees' rights were fully respected during questioning. According to him, Jerry's own behavior raised suspicions, and his past criminal record further damaged his credibility, leading the police to suspect his involvement in the girls' deaths. Detectives believed he had knowledge relevant to the case and continued to press him for answers, but Jerry maintained that this was merely an unfortunate coincidence. A few hours into the interrogation, the police took away Jerry's clothes, claiming they needed to analyze them. Instead, they gave him a thin suit that left him cold. They repeatedly showed him disturbing photographs from the murder scene and intimidated him with threats. Although Jerry consistently refused to confess, the police began threatening to arrest Sheila, suggesting that their children would be left without parents. He couldn't let that happen. To obtain a confession that could be used in court, they needed to record it on video. There was supposed to be no coercion or aggression from the officers, but many takes were necessary because Jerry initially refused to read the confession prepared by the investigator. Ultimately, the threats led him to comply with the detectives' demands. In February 2014, the civil lawsuit of a wrongfully convicted man was resolved, resulting in an award of over $6 million. However, he does not view this as a true victory. He emphasizes the importance of the wrongful conviction, which led to reforms in Lake County's law enforcement system. He notes that while he was imprisoned for a crime he didn't commit, the actual killer continued to rape and murder other victims. Fortunately, that killer is now in prison and can no longer harm anyone. Police believe he is a serial killer, and it's likely that there were additional victims. An investigation into other cases of forced confessions revealed that 4 more innocent men were also wrongfully convicted. DNA evidence cleared them, but this crucial information was ignored by the Lake County prosecutor at the time. These 4 men spent a total of 75 years in prison and are now free. The case of Jorge Torres serves as a stark reminder of the devastating impact of violent crime and the long road to justice for victims and their families. Jorge's crimes, which include the brutal murders of Laura Hobbs and Crystal Tobias in 2005, as well as the subsequent murder of Amanda Snell in 2009, went unsolved for years, leaving a trail of pain and confusion in their wake. His eventual conviction, made possible by DNA evidence, not only exonerated Jerry Hobbs, who was wrongfully imprisoned for the murders of the 2 young girls, but also revealed the extent of Jorge's crimes. The case underscores the vital role that forensic science plays in ensuring justice and preventing wrongful convictions, and serves as a stark reminder of the necessity of thorough investigations in the pursuit of the truth. Thanks to the persistence of law enforcement and the power of DNA testing, justice was finally served, although the damage done to the lives and spirits of those affected remains irreparable. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Monica McCarrick. Tori and her twin sister Lily Ball were born in September 2007 to parents Monica McCarrick and Michael Ball, who lived in San Diego, California. Their relationship was difficult from the start, partly due to their 10-year age gap. Monica struggled with substance abuse, which often led to her run-ins with the police. In 2006, she was arrested for domestic violence and given probation, but her aggressive behavior continued, eventually leading to the couple's divorce. Following the split, Michael filed for custody of the twins in 2009. Monica's life took a new turn. She began dating Robert Paulson, her first love. They had been friends for over 10 years, and their long-distance relationship began on Thanksgiving Day 2009 when Monica discovered her ex's social media page and contacted him. They began communicating as friends. However, Robert was in a relationship with another girl named Jill. In April 2010, a tragic event occurred when Jill took her own life with Robert's gun. Robert had a passion for guns and owned a collection that included a samurai sword and an agile rifle. After this heartbreaking incident, Monica supported Robert through his grief and they became closer, eventually starting a romantic relationship. In May 2010, Monica and the children moved to Pennsylvania. Their romance progressed quickly, leading to their engagement just days later. Monica was very happy during this time. She became a devoted mother, worked as a manager at a dental office, and pursued further education. Robert was also happy, and it seemed like their lives were improving. Unfortunately, this story would not have a happy ending. In August 2010, Monica and Robert moved to California while still planning their wedding. They rented an apartment in a residential area in Fairfield. Monica was looking for a school for her daughters and had obtained her license to practice dentistry. Robert supported her and admired her dedication as a mother to ensuring a good future for her daughters. He appreciated her calm demeanor. Robert worked for a film crew, which required him to travel for filming, resulting in him being absent for long periods of time. On September 9, 2010, just a month after moving to California, Robert was called away on a long business trip to film a movie in Minnesota. This left him with no choice but to leave, which upset Monica. She was not ready to let him go, as she still had unresolved issues from the move and wanted to improve their life together. Monica nevertheless agreed to let Robert go on the business trip. At first, everything seemed fine, but about 3 weeks after he left, Robert began to notice that Monica's behavior had changed significantly. She began to act very strangely. Monica discovers a script written by Robert that depicts a horror story about a man who chases children down a beach, ultimately leading to their deaths. Monica understands that the script is about her family and fears for her children's safety. However, Robert denied all of this. Robert insisted that it was a work of fiction related to his work. Throughout Robert's business trip, Monica frequently brought up her concerns in conversation. Eventually, she began to claim that Robert's previous girlfriend had died because of him. Monica suspected that Robert was involved with another woman at the time and believed that his affair contributed to his ex-girlfriend's tragic decision. Robert spent hours on the phone and texting Monica to calm her down. Unfortunately, this only worked for a short time before she began to express new suspicions. People who came into contact with her during this time noticed her paranoid behavior. Monica wanted Robert to stay home and objected to his long business trips. Robert reassured her that his trip to Minnesota would be over soon and that she was eagerly awaiting his return. On the day before his return, Robert's manager informed him that he would need to stay in Alaska for another 5 to 10 days to finish filming, as they had found the ideal location for some of the missing scenes. When he shared this news with Monica, she became extremely upset. She tried her best to convince him to return home with her and the children, saying that she could not handle the situation on her own. Although she pleaded for help, Robert felt helpless and asked her to be patient a little longer. Monica was not completely alone, her family supported her. However, Robert noticed that her mental state seemed unstable. Her friends, who remained in contact with her during this time, often mentioned this in their conversations. On September 25th, Monica contacted her friend Regina, expressing that she feared for her life. Monica truly believed that Robert and his mother might harm her. She asked Regina to contact the police if anything happened to her. That same day, Monica contacted her friend Maritza to express her concerns about Robert and his family. She stressed that she felt unsafe and feared for the safety of her children. Maritza called her to discuss the matter further. During the conversation, Monica shared that her suspicions were related to a script Robert had written that depicted a murder involving a woman and her children. Maritza reassured Monica, and for a moment things seemed to calm down, but the calm did not last long. Maritza received another alarming text message 3 days later, on September 29th. In this message, Monica claimed that someone wanted to kidnap her children and harm her. She also contacted another friend, Pamela, expressing her fear that Robert intended to harm her. Monica was genuinely afraid for her safety, but she also hoped that her fears were paranoid. She stressed that if she or her children went missing, it was important to contact the police and hold Robert accountable. Unfortunately, Pamela was unable to visit Monica this time because she was in another city visiting her mother. The conversation ended with Monica declaring her intention to go to the police to prove Robert's involvement in the murder of his ex-girlfriend, Jill. However, many of her text messages were inconsistent. She expressed stress about raising her children, feeling overwhelmed by having to deal with the problems on her own. This confused the Pamela, who knew that Robert worked hard to provide for the family. At the same time, Monica often mentioned her desire to be free, to relax, and to enjoy herself. Michael often took the Tori and Lily out, giving Monica a chance to relax. She also had many friends and family to lean on. Not everyone was able to respond immediately to Monica when a problem arose, but they were able to reach her within a few hours to offer their support. They constantly help her. Friends and acquaintances noted that in Pennsylvania, Monica was much calmer and handled everyday problems well, even when she was alone. However, when she moved to California, where all her relatives and friends lived, she became panicky about Robert's absence. From September 29th to October 4th, 2010, Monica and her children traveled to San Diego to visit their mother. During this visit, she shared a script written by Robert, which frightened her. She was also concerned about the many weapons stored in the home. She feared that Robert intended to harm them with these weapons and discussed her concerns with her mother. Monica was clearly nervous and anxious about her upcoming wedding. However, after she and her daughters went shopping for wedding dresses, her mood changed. Monica seemed happy and excited, taking many pictures of the dress she had chosen and sending them to friends and family, including one to her grandmother, Terry Faye. They had a close relationship, with her grandmother visiting regularly and supporting her. On October 11th, Monica called her grandmother Terry again and expressed her fear of losing her daughter and her concerns for her own safety. However, during this call, Terry noticed that Monica's behavior was unusual. Monica's situation is confusing. She has moved across the country in search of a better life, hoping to be closer to her family. Her goal is to marry Robert and build a life with him and their children. However, she frequently expresses fears for her safety, especially around Robert. Despite her fear of Robert, she pursues the marriage. Meanwhile, Michael is fighting for custody of their twins. Robert's mother, Roxanne, became increasingly concerned about Monica. While her son was away, she noticed that Monica was losing control. Monica handled things well at first, but as time went on, her instability became more apparent. Roxanne often takes Tori and Lily for walks, giving Monica time to rest. Occasionally, Monica and the children would visit Roxanne. An alarming incident occurred while Monica was sleeping at Roxanne's house. She suddenly woke up around 3 in the morning and began to prepare for something. Roxanne heard a noise and went outside to check what was going on. Monica pointed to a car parked on the street near her house, believing that someone was following her, which made her very nervous. Roxanne, knowing the owner of the car, tried to reassure Monica. The car belonged to a neighbor who had just returned home late from work. He had lived in the area for a long time, was a devoted family man and did not pose any threat to them. Monica's concerns did not subside, so she took her daughters and went home, insisting she did not feel safe. When she returned home, she began to feel more comfortable. The next morning, she informed Robert's mother, Roxanne, that she was feeling fine. In the afternoon, she called Roxanne at work, saying that a delivery man had come to her house and hinted that he might be part of a plot to harm her. Despite Roxanne's attempts to calm her down, Monica remained restless. She then tried to call her mother, but her mother was at work and could not talk for long. Her mother reassured Monica to calm down. Monica replied that everything was fine and then ended the call. The next morning, October 12th, the neighborhood manager came to Monica's apartment to ask her to move her car. She parked her car blocking several other parking spaces. When the manager knocked on the door, Monica was too scared to open it. After a long conversation through the door, Monica finally agreed to open the door and go outside to park her car properly. During this time, the manager noticed that Monica's 2 daughters, Tori and Lily, were in the apartment and they seemed okay. Monica called in to take time off work so she could get a new hairstyle for her wedding. While she was on the phone, her manager noticed a child crying in the background. Robert later spoke to Monica on the phone and via text messages. He found her messages confusing and included some inappropriate quotes. From what he could understand, it sounded like she was talking about children. One message read, "Let the bunnies go away forever." Robert understood this to be a reference to the custody battle involving Monica's ex-husband, Michael, who was seeking full custody. It was likely that the court would award custody to Michael, which would mean that Lily and Tori could be separated from Monica. With her past issues with substance abuse and mental health, she was at risk of losing her parental rights. However, Robert was busy and didn't think much of the message. That evening, Monica and Robert spoke on the phone. Monica was very difficult to understand, speaking very quickly and seeming to move around her apartment, with a lot of background noise. She hung up several times but called back immediately. She insisted that whatever had happened should be considered an accident. It was unclear what she meant, but her tone was very disturbing. Monica also mentioned that she had planned to start a fire with her children. Suddenly, the fire alarm went off, and he heard Monica scream before the call abruptly ended. Worried, Robert kept calling Monica, but no one answered. Worried, he contacted the police to check on her. It felt like a horrible nightmare, but he had no idea that the situation was much more horrifying than he could have imagined. Monica fed Tori and Lily and tied them to high chairs. She then took a samurai sword from the wall in Robert's office and began to violently attack the children. Within minutes, Monica had killed Tori and Lily and used their bodies to barricade the apartment door before setting the apartment on fire. The neighbors only heard the children's short cries and some noises, which did not arouse any suspicion. When the fire alarm rang, it was too late. The downstairs neighbor noticed smoke coming from the apartment above and called the police. After calling, he quickly ran upstairs and broke down the door, but it wouldn't open. He then tried to enter through the sliding window of the third-floor apartment. Luckily, he was able to reach the window and get in. The room was filled with thick smoke, making it difficult to see. When the neighbor entered the area where the tragic incident with the children took place, the entire floor was covered in blood, and there was a sword and a medicine bottle on the ground, which could have been the murder weapon. Unfortunately, it was too late to save Tori and Lily. When police arrived, they were unable to enter the home immediately because the children's bodies were blocking the front door. After some struggle, they were able to get inside. The entire apartment was filled with smoke, and the fire was in the pantry next to the front door. After the fire was extinguished and the smoke cleared, the rescue team discovered the children's bodies. They also found Monica, who was unconscious and had suffered multiple serious injuries that appeared to be self-inflicted. Monica was rushed to the medical center in critical condition. Her injuries included lacerations to her neck and hands, several severed fingers, and severed tendons. Both ankles were injured, and there was a deep wound to her thigh. During a search of the apartment, police found several weapons, including a loaded rifle, a shotgun, and a loaded pistol. A significant amount of live ammunition was discovered in the hallway, along with a sword and a lighter that Monica used to start a fire in the pantry. 2 high chairs, which were overturned and covered in blood, indicated that the children were eating when the murder occurred, as trays with plates and food were found scattered on the floor. A laptop displaying cartoons was in front of them. The kitchen table was also smeared with blood, suggesting that there was an attempt to clean it hurriedly. Additionally, a thrilling novel by James Patterson about a serial killer was opened to a page that read, "My daughter died." During the analysis of the vial, forensic experts found no dangerous or powerful drugs. During the autopsy, they discovered multiple injuries on Tori and Lily. Tori had 11 cuts on her face and deep wounds on the front of her neck. On her chest, there were 9 shallow cuts and 2 stab wounds. One punctured her lung and the other punctured her heart. Lily had multiple injuries, including 5 cuts on her face and neck and 9 cuts on her chest, including one so severe that it nearly severed her head. The sword had severed Lily's larynx and arteries. The children's arms were the most injured, suggesting the twins had attempted to defend themselves. None of the girls inhaled smoke from the fire, indicating that they were already dead when the fire started, as there was no soot in their lungs. The brutality of their murders shocked all the experts involved in the case. Shortly after being released from the hospital, 27-year-old Monica was arrested and charged with 2 counts of premeditated murder, arson, attempting to destroy evidence, and obstructing the investigation. Confined to a wheelchair and covered in bandages, she appeared in court on October 26, 2010, where she did not plead guilty. Monica argued that her crime was a result of insanity, leading to her being sent for a psychiatric evaluation from October 2010 to June 2011. A prison psychiatrist met with her more than 10 times, spending around 20 hours in discussions, conducting various psychological tests, reviewing her medical records, and speaking with her family members. The psychiatrist found that when Monica was 14, she had displayed similar self-harming behaviors. At that time, she was diagnosed with a type of attention deficit disorder and prescribed medication to manage it. However, she did not complete her treatment and later began abusing illegal drugs, which resulted in her developing bipolar disorder. The Monica stated that she started drinking alcohol at 12 and began using marijuana at 14, which ultimately led to her becoming addicted to illegal drugs by 18. From 2003 to 2005, she was diagnosed with depression while living in San Diego and received professional psychiatric treatment. After Robert went on a business trip, she relapsed and used drugs throughout September and October 2010. Monica reported experiencing paranoid thoughts, common in heavy users. She confessed to her psychiatrist that she had been heavily intoxicated in the 4 days before the crime. Monica often told her doctor that her addiction made it difficult for her to communicate with her children. As a result, she often tried to stay away from them, sometimes leaving them with strangers. She called her loved ones several times, seeking their help, and they tried to support her. However, the psychiatrist revealed that Monica's problems were not only due to illegal drugs. In the days leading up to the tragic event, she experienced delusions, paranoia, and feelings of being persecuted. She believed that Robert and his mother were planning to kidnap her daughters and torture them, a fear that was heightened by a story Robert wrote. In prison, she told a psychiatrist that she had read in a book the exact time that the attackers would arrive to try to enslave her daughter. The psychiatrist recognized this as a symptom known as reference ideas, in which the patient believes that ordinary events contain hidden messages. Monica was convinced that certain events were destined to happen. Monica believed that this was a sign that her children would be enslaved. In her desperation to save Tori and Lily, she realized that even if she saved them from Robert, she could still lose them if her ex-husband Michael won custody in court. This led her to the tragic conclusion that her daughters needed to be killed. Which she did. However, despite her serious actions, her thought process showed that she was still quite sane, despite some mental health issues. She planned to barricade the door so that it could not be opened immediately and only set it on fire after killing her children, with the intention of covering up what had happened. Another psychiatrist, after speaking with Monica, concluded that she was not fully aware of her actions. He believed that Monica thought she was saving her children when she brutally killed them. On October 25, 2011, while in prison, Monica confided to a fellow inmate that she was hearing voices. By November, she began to have paranoid thoughts, fearing that she would be attacked. In April 2012, she overdosed while still incarcerated. Monica reported using illegal drugs, and prison guards observed that she drank up to 12 cups of coffee a day, which worsened her mental state. She frequently expressed concerns about threats to her life from prison gangs and often attempted to communicate with doctors and other professionals. But her reports were inconsistent, unclear, and sometimes completely false. Her psychological evaluation hearings dragged on. Michael attended the trial and asked not to show mercy to the Monica who'd taken the lives of the babies. The final decision was up to the jury. After hours of deliberation, they concluded that Monica had intentionally killed Tori and Lily. On June 15, 2012, Monica McCarrick was convicted of first-degree murder. The jury sentenced Monica to 2 consecutive life terms in state prison without the possibility of parole. During her trial, she cried. She told the court that she was praying for everyone's well-being, despite her own deteriorating condition. Monica expressed that she loved her daughters. Monica is currently serving her sentence in a California prison and has attempted to appeal her sentence multiple times. On August 22, 2019, an online petition was started, urging the governor of California to overturn Monica's sentence. The petition claims that nearly all psychiatric experts who have reviewed her case believe she was not aware of her actions when the crime occurred. However, as of now, only 144 people have signed the petition, and Monica is still incarcerated. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of David Camm. David Camm was born in 1964 in Albany, Indiana, USA. He grew up to be a healthy and famous young man, especially popular with women. In 1984, he met Kimberly Wren, a beautiful woman who instantly captured his heart. The two quickly realized their feelings for each other. Nevertheless, their love was complicated by the fact that David was already married to his high school sweetheart. From his marriage, he had a daughter, but he began a secret relationship with Kimberly. Eventually, this affair was discovered, leading to his divorce. 3 years later, David and Kimberly got married. Kimberly believed she had found the love of her life and hoped to spend forever with him. Unfortunately, David was not the perfect husband she thought he was. Only 3 years after the wedding day, David met a new woman, Stephanie McCarthy, at the fitness center where he regularly trained. They initially developed a close friendship that endured. Even after David had a son, Bradley, from his marriage to Kimberly in 1993. During this time, David maintained friendly relations with the fitness trainer, Stephanie. For 2 years, David and Stephanie's connection remained platonic, partly because Stephanie had a lover at the time, but the attraction between them was evident. After Stephanie broke up with her lover in 1994, David seized the opportunity to ask her out. Without hesitation, he made his intentions clear and went public with the affair, openly taking Stephanie to car races, restaurants, and a nightclub. Kimberly began to suspect her husband David was being unfaithful while she was pregnant with their second child. When confronted, David admitted to having an affair with his fitness trainer. This thing led to the demise of their marriage. At 5 months pregnant, Kimberly asked David to move out of their home. He called his mother to see if he could move back in, but she refused, causing him to become furious. His parents' failure to help him, instead siding with Kimberly, left David feeling rejected. As the conversation escalated, David started smashing the kitchen, prompting his mother to call the police. Despite the police being called, they did not take any action against David due to his being a colleague. Instead, they advised him to calm down and avoid tarnishing the reputation of the police force. The marriage eventually ended, and David moved into a new apartment, where his new girlfriend Stephanie joined him, even though she had her own place. This move further alienated David from his relatives, who sided with Kimberly and were appalled by his betrayal. David filed for divorce right when Kimberly, his pregnant wife, needed him most, as she was about to give birth to their second child. Their baby girl, Jill, was born on February 28, 1995. On the day of the birth, David was absent. Instead, David's parents were there to provide support to Kimberly, who had been left alone by her husband. David's new relationship with Stephanie was also short-lived. It ended in March 1995 when he found out that she had been secretly meeting her ex-boyfriend at the gym where she worked. To David's dismay, Stephanie had been developing feelings for her ex again. David initially suspected something when Stephanie began disappearing on dates, and eventually, he discovered the truth. When he confronted Stephanie after she returned home late from work, he became enraged. Feeling betrayed, David pulled out his 9mm pistol, threatening to harm her and then himself. Luckily, he was talked out of doing something reckless. After this tumultuous confrontation, Stephanie left David, and it became clear that she had gone back to her ex-boyfriend, ending their relationship. Following his introspective moment, David reached out to his ex-wife Kimberly to apologize for past mistakes. To his surprise, she was still emotionally invested in him and chose to forgive him. As it happened, Kimberly was going through a difficult time and needed support, creating a perfect opportunity for David to make amends and rekindle their relationship. David took the opportunity, he packed his belongings and moved back in with Kimberly, and also managed to improve his relationship with his parents. They were pleased to see their son think things through and subsequently offered their renewed support. Kimberly later started a well-paying job at an insurance company, while David left his position as a police officer, despite having over 10 years of experience. He transitioned to working with his uncle at a waterproofing store. Turns out, he quit being a police officer not by accident. The real reason comes from the fact that he already has many stains on his record, due to facing many complaints of inappropriate behavior. David changed careers and found that his new job as a store employee actually paid more than his previous role as a patrol officer. His uncle's success in the store likely contributed to this positive change. David and his wife, Kimberly, were able to fulfill their long-held dream of building a home in Georgetown, Indiana. This new house symbolized the healing of their relationship and indicated that everything was going well again. It felt as though life had finally returned to normal. The family was happy in many ways, and David's transformation played a significant role in this. Kimberly noticed that he had changed for the better. He started spending much more time with their son and daughter. However, this positive change only scratched the surface. The reality is David's struggle with addiction to a carefree lifestyle was still present. In 1997, he met an old friend, Michelle, and he secretly began an affair. They would meet in the back seat of his car, but the relationship ended quickly when Michelle learned about David's marriage and children. However, David did not give up and quickly found another love interest. Her name was Lisa, the girlfriend of one of David's friends. David would repeat the same pattern over and over again. He is constantly looking for new lovers, ignoring Kimberly's parents' requests that he change his ways. David was assertive, and also had a short temper, and would become angry if his advances were rejected. However, he would quickly lose interest in the women he pursued and move on to someone new. This dissolute behavior went on behind his wife's back for about 6 years. On September 28, 2000, Kimberly picked up her youngest daughter, Jill, 5 years old, from dance class. Jill was experiencing sharp pain in her lower abdomen, so they decided to leave class early. She also picked up her 7-year-old son, Bradley, from his swimming lessons. According to the neighbors, who lived next door, Kimberly and the children returned home around 7:30 p.m. The neighbors saw Kimberly pulling into her driveway in her car. Kimberly opened the garage door and drove inside, spending a considerable amount of time there. The neighbors didn't know what happened there, they didn't pay any attention to her, but a few times, when they looked out the window, they saw her car was still there. No screams or strange noises were heard until 9:20 p.m. At that time, David was playing basketball and came home late from the game. Therefore, he rushed back home to avoid arguing with his wife and put the children to bed in time. The drive home took about 5 minutes. Upon arriving home around 9:30 p.m., he was surprised to find the garage door still open. As he entered, he was met with a horrific scene. His wife, Kimberly, half naked and lying in a pool of blood, had a gunshot wound to the head. The car's driver's side door was open, and their children were in the back seat. Their daughter Jill was alive, but their son Bradley seemed lifeless. However, David saw Bradley flinch and believed the boy could still be saved, so he then rushed to pull Bradley out of the car. David, a former police officer, found Bradley still warm and attempted to administer first aid. Unfortunately, it was too late, and the child had already passed away. In a state of panic, David immediately called 911 and informed the dispatcher of the tragedy. He requested that all available paramedics and police officers be sent to his house. As his wife and children were dead, David then rushed to his uncle's house, which was nearby. His uncle, a serviceman, was shocked by the news and grabbed his gun to accompany David back to the house. Upon their return, David overcome with grief, and his uncle had to physically restrain him from re-entering the house. Soon after, police and an ambulance arrived at the scene. Police initially believed the murder was linked to a botched robbery, in which Kimberly and her children returned home at an unfortunate time and were attacked. However, there were no signs of forced entry, and the home's contents were intact. Kimberly was found with her pants down and her shoes neatly placed on the roof of the car. This led detectives to suspect that a sexual assault had occurred, and it was believed that she was shot to prevent her from being a witness, especially since her children were also killed. However, the crime scene didn't appear to be a random. Only 3 shell casings were found at the scene, matching the number of shots to the head, with no stray bullets or evidence of a wild shooting spree. A forensic examination revealed skin cells under Kimberly's fingernails, which were forwarded to the lab for DNA testing. Additionally, a palm print was found on the card used by Kimberly. Another significant piece of evidence was a gray sweatshirt discovered in the back seat with her deceased son, Bradley. Based on this evidence, the possibility of robbery was dismissed, although the theory of rape remained under investigation. The police began to focus on David Cam, a former policeman, as their primary suspect, as it is often the closest individuals who are involved. Although David had never displayed aggression towards his family before this incident, his depraved lifestyle became a point of interest for detectives. If before it was just a reason for neighbors and colleagues to discuss, now it is more like a motive for murder. It was rumored that the relationship was deteriorating, possibly heading toward divorce due to infidelity, which may have led David to feel desperate or vengeful. Additionally, a new clue was found just days before the murder: the life insurance payout unexpectedly increased. This detail further fueled the investigation. Interrogating David, a former police officer, was very difficult because he was familiar with investigative techniques. As a result, detectives employed alternative strategies. They pressured him to confess, suggesting all evidence pointed to him, but David consistently denied any involvement. He asserted that he had no connection to the family's murder and never wished them harm. According to David, his marriage to Kimberly was not always smooth, they experiencing issues common in relationships. He candidly admitted to constantly cheating on his wife but claimed to still love her and their children. He expressed surprise that he did not know who could harm his wife and children. He also said that both he and his wife had very good relationships with people around them and that his wife had no enemies. A forensic examination revealed that Kimberly had not been raped, but their daughter, Jill, showed signs of inflammation, which could be a sign of violence or a genitourinary condition, although the experts did not properly note this in the report. The autopsy confirmed that 3 people died between 7:30 and 8:30 p.m. David's behavior was suspicious, particularly when he initially refused to hand over his clothes to investigators, but he eventually consented. He also willingly provided samples for DNA testing. However, following this, David began to threaten the detective in charge of the interrogation, claiming that if he went to jail, he would return to kill them all. Forensic experts inspected the crime scene and compared the evidence found with the condition of the bodies. Upon arrival, a specialist noticed a strong smell of bleach at the scene. They found a large bucket and a mop, indicating someone had attempted to clean up blood stains and rearrange the furniture. Detectives suspect that this was deliberately intended to eliminate evidence. Robbers or rapists typically do not clean up after themselves. There were several unusual elements in the case, such as signs of cleaning, Kimberly being undressed, an unknown sweatshirt on Bradley, and Jill having unexplained injuries. These factors suggested that the scene had been staged, and David, an experienced policeman, it is entirely possible to do this. The police had significant doubts about the fingerprints found on the car. The vehicle had been parked in public places every day, meaning the fingerprints could belong to any city resident and weren't necessarily linked to the crime. Accurately identifying the owner of the fingerprints was not possible. Another puzzling aspect was the position of Kimberly's shoes. It had been removed from her feet and neatly placed on the car's roof. Investigators considered two theories. One suggested that Kimberly had taken off her shoes while still in the car and put them on the roof when she exited. However, it was unclear why she would do this. Perhaps she drove without shoes, but David insisted that his wife never drove that way. The second hypothesis is the criminal could have had a strange obsession with women's shoes. Besides, the gray sweatshirt found on Bradley was not recognized by David. He had no knowledge of its origin or ownership, suggesting it likely belonged to the criminal. But why was it on the child? Based on the evidence collected, 36-year-old David Cam was arrested for the murder of his family, facing charges for 3 murders. During the trial, the microscopic blood spatter on his clothes became the primary evidence of his guilt. The motive was thought to stem from infidelity and promiscuity, which drove him to commit extreme acts. Neighbors testified that they heard gunshots coming from the garage around 9:20 p.m. as soon as David returned home. The prosecution maintained that David was guilty, while the defense presented counterarguments. Experts noted that if David had shot someone at close range, there would have been an amount of blood splatter on his clothes. In many more visible stains. David claimed to have an alibi, with 11 witnesses confirming that he had been at a basketball game until at least 9 p.m. This was also backed up by billing records from his cell phone. Despite this, the prosecutors argued that they had compelling reasons to consider him the murderer. They questioned his alibi, citing his affairs. 12 women he had recently been involved with testified that he had flirted with them and used his police badge and uniform to approach there. The DNA evidence from the crime scene was expected to be the primary proof of David's guilt. However, testing revealed no match with David's DNA. Additionally, the handprint found on the vehicle did not belong his. Despite analyzing all collected materials through a criminal database, no connections were found. Ultimately, investigators discovered 8 microscopic drops of blood on David's clothes, which were identified as belonging to his daughter, Jill. An expert witness at the crime scene initially suggested that the blood drops found on clothing could only result in point-blank shooting. However, it was later discovered that this person was just an ordinary photographer and not a forensic scientist. Despite this, he acted as a forensic scientist during the first trial and drew significant conclusions. Additionally, David's alibi was also questioned. 11 witnesses consistently testified that he was going to the game and could not have been home when the murder occurred. Furthermore, David would have needed to shower and change his clothes afterwards. Medical examinations of Jill revealed that the trauma to her genitals was due to inflammation she was experiencing at the time. This led to the rejection of the original theory that David had perpetrated sexual violence against his daughter. The defense argued that the tiny blood droplets, once considered crucial evidence of guilt, were too small to accuse. They contended that if David had repeatedly shot his children and wife, there would have been a larger amount of blood and bigger stains. They claimed that these small blood stains on David's shirt were from him reaching over Jill to help Bradley out of the car. On March 17, 2002, David Cam was found guilty of murdering 3 individuals and was sentenced to 195 years in prison. He quickly appealed the decision, claiming that the trial had been unfair and that he had been wrongly convicted. In August 2004, the Supreme Court agreed to hear his appeal. However, the prosecution maintained that David was responsible for the murders of his family. A retrial took place in 2005, during which it was discovered that some DNA evidence had not been compared with existing databases by the police. This raises suspicions that there may have been a plot to harm David. The investigators had not pursued other suspects and focused solely on him. After the retrial, police re-examined the DNA samples from the crime scene and found a match with a criminal named Charles Bonney, who had been recently released from prison. Charles acknowledged that a sweatshirt found at the scene belonged to him but claimed he had donated it to the Salvation Army long before the crime and did not know what had happened to it. Charles owned a pair of fancy women's shoes and had previously been involved in 3 kidnappings of women. He was also known by the nickname Ridge, which was written on a sweatshirt that was found but could not be identified. Forensic analysis of the evidence revealed that palm prints, DNA from the clothes, and DNA from Kimberly's underwear and under her fingernails all matched Charles. Before committing the crime, he was out on bail and was a suspect to the police, who later summoned him for questioning. During the interrogation, Charles denied any involvement in the murder and lied in response to all police inquiries. He frequently changed his story. Eventually, he claimed that he had gone to David's house to sell him a gun. According to him, after purchasing the weapon, David shot his entire family. Charles stated that he was still in the house at the time but felt compelled to remain silent because he was threatened with death. He insisted that he tried to escape but accidentally tripped over one of Kimberly's shoes. He tried to present himself as a good person, explaining to the police that he had picked up Kimberly's shoes and placed them on the roof of car. However, he could not account for how his DNA was found on Kimberly's underwear and body, despite claiming he had not touched her. Everyone believed that Charles's claims were false. During a re-examination of the evidence, experts discovered a new set of DNA samples belonging to Charles's ex-girlfriend, which had been found at the crime scene by accident. She was questioned, and it emerged that on the night of the murder, Charles had returned home in a disturbed state, nervous, covered in blood, and breathing heavily. Additionally, he was found to have a gun. Meanwhile, Charles showed a keen interest in the investigation into the murder of the Kimberly family, closely following every news update on TV. This behavior made his ex-girlfriend suspicious of his involvement in the crime. Furthermore, Charles failed a polygraph test. As a result, Charles Bonney was arrested and charged with the murders of Kimberly and her 2 children, Bradley and Jill, but he maintained his innocence. During his trial, he quickly pleaded guilty to all 3 charges on his lawyer's advice but did not provide any details about the crime. He received a sentence of 225 years in prison. Although the murderer, Charles, has confessed to the crime and been convicted, but David Cam's trial is still ongoing. It seemed like it was time to drop all charges against David and release him. However, prosecution began to argue that David was an accomplice to the crime and colluded with Charles. The primary evidence supporting this claim was the intimate injuries found on David's daughter, Jill. It was believed that David had a history of domestic abuse and had also molested his daughter. When his wife discovered this, she threatened to go to the police, leading him to decide to kill his entire family. David supposedly conspired with Charles, who had been released from prison, to cover up his heinous actions. Although David might not have physically participated in the murders, the prosecution argued that he incited Charles to commit the act and served as the ideological mastermind behind it. During the new trial, David denied all these allegations. Another forensic expert examined Jill's body and confirmed that there was no evidence of violence. Instead, the inflammation was linked to a medical condition. The defense argued that David and Charles had never met, had no mutual acquaintances, and there was no correspondence, phone calls, or any other form of communication between them. On March 6, 2006, David was once again found guilty of murdering his family and was sentenced to life in prison. He immediately filed an appeal, particularly upset that the new charges included sexual abuse of his own daughter. However, the prosecution failed to present any evidence of violence. The appellate court reviewed the case materials and again ruled in favor of David, citing insufficient evidence to uphold the original sentence. It was revealed that the previous prosecutor, who was accusing David, had a financial interest in the case because he was under contract to write a book about it. This thing of interest compromised his objectivity. A new prosecutor took over the case, leading to the discovery of new evidence. A photographer, who had testified in the first two trials as an expert, admitted to lying about his qualifications and revealed that he was not a forensic scientist. Further analysis of the DNA samples confirmed that Charles had left traces at the crime scene and on the victims. Despite this evidence, David continued to face accusations, with the financial motive being highlighted. He had collected $750,000 in life insurance after his wife's death. Ultimately, on October 24, 2013, David Camm was acquitted of all charges. Nevertheless, there remained some who were convinced of his guilt, as well as those who believed in his innocence. Following his acquittal, David Camm filed a lawsuit against the county, seeking $30 million in damages for the emotional distress he suffered. The judge acknowledged that the state's experts had reasonably concluded that the blood spatter indicated David's involvement and asserted that no police officer had intentionally tried to frame him. David was awarded $5 million in moral damages for the time he spent in prison. The parents of Kimberly sought payment from him, believing he was still guilty of her death due to financial motives. They demanded a portion of the money he received from insurance and moral compensation. Charles Bonney remains in prison, serving a sentence of 225 years. Remarkably, it took David 13 years to prove his innocence. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Josh Niles. In 2018, a young couple, Josh Niles and Amber Washburn, moved to Carlton Street in the small town of Sodus, New York, population about 8,000. Josh, then 28, grew up in Newark, Wayne County, in a family of 5 siblings. Amber, 4 years younger than Josh, had been dating him for years, but they had never officially married. Josh had 2 children from a previous marriage, and his 2 children currently lived with him and Amber. In addition, the couple raised another child together, named Joshua Jr. Amber got along well with her boyfriend's children and treated them like family. Life went on as usual. Josh had saved some money and was planning to start a small business. Amber took care of the children and was also planning to find a job. The couple wanted to get married and live a happy family life. But this story will not have a happy ending. At approximately 2 p.m. on October 22, 2018, Josh Niles left his home to go to work. He started his car and pulled into his driveway, then noticed a man sitting on a bench near his house. He realized the man was waiting for him, so Josh went outside to meet the stranger. According to neighbors who happened to notice the 2 men, they talked for a while and both appeared to be very stressed. Then, gunshots rang out. The stranger shot Josh. At the same time, Amber was returning to the house and backing into the house. Minutes after Josh was murdered, the attacker fled. Josh was now lying on the ground, bleeding profusely. Amber sat in the car and screamed her boyfriend's name. Suddenly, the attacker shot through the windshield of the car, hitting Amber in the head. It all happened so fast that Amber, who witnessed the attack, had no time to escape, although she tried to hide. A neighbor who witnessed the incident quickly ran home when she heard the gunshots. Not knowing where the gunshots came from, she closed the door and prayed for it to end quickly. Then everything became quiet. The distraught neighbor quickly called 911 to report the shooting. Patrol officers arrived shortly after and found Josh's body next to his car, where he had suffered multiple gunshot wounds to the chest. They discovered Amber's car when the officers checked on Amber, who was also dead, and in the back seat was her 4-year-old son, Joshua Jr., eating McDonald's fried chicken. The autistic child did not understand what had happened. The important thing was that he was alive. The other children suddenly disappeared from both the car and the house. Where could they have gone? It was later discovered that they were at school and safe. During the investigation of the crime scene, the police found approximately 13 spent shell casings. Josh had been shot 12 times and Amber had suffered a fatal head injury. It was clear that the attacker was primarily targeting Josh and that Amber may have been killed simply because she witnessed the incident. Most witnesses did not realize that they had heard gunshots, mistaking them for fireworks. However, some eyewitness accounts have been proven valid. They described the attacker as a man dressed in black clothing and wearing a green hat. Unfortunately, his face was obscured and could not be seen from a distance. After the shooting, the suspect fled through the backyards of nearby homes without a vehicle. Police quickly began interviewing anyone who may have seen a man matching that description and are also searching for surveillance camera footage in the area to gather more information about the attack. Due to insufficient information, authorities decided to close the nearest school, and the police deployed search dogs, suspecting that the fugitive might still be in the vicinity. The search lasted several hours but did not result in finding the attacker. The investigation led police to a remote parking lot where the lights were off. It is believed that the criminal entered a car and drove away, making it impossible for the dogs to track any scent further. The only evidence discovered by detectives was a ski mask found in a trash can at the parking lot. Neighbors of the victims reported seeing a man wearing a similar mask fleeing the scene, but he also had a hood on, preventing them from identifying any facial features. Witnesses noted that this man had been seen in the area prior to the shooting, behaving cautiously as if he were watching someone. The locals were frightened. This was the first time something like this had happened in their quiet, peaceful town. They worried that the criminal, still at large, might endanger others. However, the police believed this was a targeted attack and that the criminal did not pose a threat to the wider community. They worked to reassure the public and recognized that their top priority was to find and arrest the attacker to ensure the city's safety. They committed all their resources to this effort. Police determined that this was not a random act, like a robbery, but a targeted attack. The criminal knew Amber and Josh by name. The attacker was also a skilled marksman, accurately shooting Josh with the first shot. But who would want to harm this young couple? Police began looking into the family's acquaintances and friends to identify potential suspects. The first people to raise suspicions were Josh's ex-wife, Charlene Childers, and her husband, Tim Dean. Josh and Charlene's first marriage was unsuccessful. Josh, at 16, met Charlene through a mutual friend, and they quickly started dating. When Charlene faced issues at home, she moved in with Josh and his parents. In July 2009, they had a daughter, got married, and moved into their own home. 5 years later, they welcomed another child. However, their relationship was tumultuous. Josh was obstinate, and Charlene often instigated arguments. They frequently fought, which ultimately led to their divorce. Afterwards, Charlene relocated with their children to San Ray, Texas. Post-divorce, a custody battle ensued, with both parents vying for full custody of the children. Soon after moving to Texas, Charlene remarried James Childers, but that marriage ended in divorce shortly thereafter. She then entered a relationship with Tim Dean, whom she later married. Tim displayed abusive behavior, becoming violent towards both Charlene and her children. Not long before a tragic incident, Tim physically assaulted Charlene's daughter. When the girl refused to eat one day, Tim struck her in the face, an event that was recorded by his wife, who dismissed it at the time. Subsequently, the video was shared on social media, reaching Josh, the child's father. Josh reported the situation to the police, leading to an investigation that confirmed his claims. Tim was arrested and charged with child abuse. As a result, the children of Josh and Charlene were returned to their father, Josh, due to Tim's abusive behavior and Charlene's lack of action. It seemed likely that Josh would gain full custody of the children. Their lives appeared to be improving until October 2018, when tragedy struck. During this time, a heated argument erupted between Josh and Charlene over custody of the children. Police contacted Charlene, who was in Texas at the time and could not have participated in the attack on the couple. She learned about the incident through social media, where she found news reports about the attack. Charlene was initially concerned for her children but was relieved to learn that they were safe. She maintained that she had nothing to do with the crime as she had not been near the location of the incident. Her alibi was verified, leading the police to remove her from the list of suspects. Relatives of the victims, Josh and Amber, were shocked by the news. They quickly provided vital information to the police, suspecting that Josh's ex-wife, Charlene, and her husband were involved as they had frequently argued with Josh and had made threats against him. They believed that no one else could have committed the crime, noting that the attack was clearly personal. At the same time, forensic experts were meticulously investigating the crime scene and comparing gathered evidence. It became clear that the Josh and the shooter had a prior relationship, as they had spoken before the attack, and the shooter knew Amber's name. The police suspected the murder was premeditated, especially since neighbors reported seeing the shooter waiting for the couple and noted that nothing was stolen despite 12 shots being fired. Josh's neighbors and friends say that Josh and Amber, although new to the area, were polite and friendly, but his ex-wife Charlene described Josh differently. She described him as unpredictable and capable of using violence during arguments. Charlene also mentioned that he had issues with drugs. The police verified this information, finding archived records that showed he had smoked in his youth. Despite these revelations, Charlene supported the father of her children and felt outraged that someone had taken him from them. Her statements about drug use led police to form new theories. They considered the possibility that someone with serious addictions could become involved in criminal activities, making the shooting potentially related to a drug dispute. It has been speculated that he may have been in debt to drug dealers, but these theories have never been confirmed. A toxicology report found no alcohol or drugs in the murdered couple's systems. Their relatives claim that they did not use any substances, and no evidence of drugs was found in their home. After reviewing the couple's text messages and phone calls, police concluded that they had no connection to drug dealers, making this theory seem unlikely. The police then focused on Josh's close associates and found no suspicious individuals. All the evidence pointed to Charlene, who married Tim in 2018. They began investigating Tim and his possible involvement in the crime. It was discovered that Tim and Charlene had met while working in Texas, Charlene working at an animal rescue service and Tim working at the police department. Tim quickly begins a romance with Charlene, but he is known to be aggressive and has a troubled past, leading some to suspect he may have committed murder. His history of child abuse further tarnishes his reputation. Surprisingly, Tim Dean was previously a police chief in Texas but was fired in disgrace after an incident involving a child. With his reputation damaged, he struggles to find new employment and eventually takes a job delivering fast food. At the same time, rumors spread that Tim wanted revenge for being fired from the police, specifically targeting Josh, who had caused him trouble. Meanwhile, Charlene had a chance to regain custody of her children from her previous marriage. There was a lawsuit to settle the custody dispute, but Charlie was determined not to back down. She wanted children and was willing to fight Josh in court. In August 2018, she traveled to New York, where the court informed her that she would not be awarded custody while she was married and living with Tim Dean, a man accused of abuse. She promised to divorce Tim for the sake of the children, which brought more attention to him from the police. Not only did Tim lose his job, he also faced the possibility of losing his wife, his home, and everything he had worked for over the years. He may have had a motive for killing Josh, to get revenge and gain custody of his wife's children. Additionally, he had no alibi at the time of the murder, making him the prime suspect. However, strong evidence was needed to arrest and prosecute. The police began gathering more information and obtained a search warrant and wiretapped Tim's phone calls, which led to the discovery of crucial information. It turns out that just before the shooting, Tim had an accident 400 kilometers from New York in a rental car, all in Kansas. Tim Dean made it to New York, but it was completely unclear why he was there and why he disappeared so quickly. This made him even more suspicious. After the attack, police discovered the crash and traced Tim's rental car to a mechanic who towed it after the incident. The mechanic reported that when he repaired the car, he found multiple magazines containing various caliber bullets, a handgun, and a bulletproof vest in the trunk. The black bulletproof vest, which lacked armor inserts and was typically used for sport shooting or hunting, had pockets and ammunition pouches. The police viewed surveillance footage from car rental companies. Tim went to several car rental companies and rented a car from one. He paid in cash, which the company refused to accept, drawing attention to him for being refused. Tim chose to rent a car instead of using his own, and the fact that he paid in cash aroused the police's suspicions. It appeared that, as an experienced police officer, he had gone to great lengths to conceal his actions, but still left a trail of evidence from the accident, where his real name was revealed. This gave the police reason to arrest him and conduct a more thorough investigation into Tim's involvement in the murder. Tim Dean was arrested and taken to the police station for questioning. He shared a very unbelievable statement about wanting to take a long trip to work things out with Charlene after they had a disagreement. He mentioned that he went to New York to talk to her uncle, hoping that he could help mend their relationship. However, Tim did not confirm that he had ever met Josh and Amber, the victims of the case. Despite the many coincidences, all of the police's suspicions were not confirmed, as there was too little information and Tim denied any involvement in the case. The police were forced to release Tim, but they continued to investigate the information. Tim Dean rented a car for his trip under the name of his friend and former colleague, Braun Bowler, instead of his own. This led police to question Braun. During questioning, Braun claimed that he had no knowledge of Tim's plans and was only helping a friend. However, the police suspected that he was not being completely honest and urged him to share any information he might have. The police warned Braun that if Tim was convicted and it was discovered that Braun had concealed important information, he could be considered an accomplice and face serious consequences. To verify his honesty, the police planned to use a lie detector, but Braun failed. He then revealed to the police that there was a double murder plot being carried out at Tim Dean's home. The two experienced police officers meticulously planned the details to avoid detection and escape responsibility for the crime. During the investigation, it was decided to rent a car for Tim through a friend, without his name on any documents to avoid detection. The plan almost worked. The former cop planned to get to New York while avoiding attention. However, his plan was ruined by an accident. Charlene, the ex-wife of Josh the man who was shot, was also involved in the plot. Tim Dean was charged with committing the crime for her benefit. After losing custody of their children, Charlene became the driving force behind the crime. According to Ron's testimony, she informed Tim that Josh and Amber needed to be removed so that her life could return to normal. She also used her credit card to provide additional money to rent a second car. Since Tim only had cash, which was not accepted by businesses in Kansas, it was clear that Charlene was complicit in the crime after he fled the scene of the accident. 2 weeks after the double murder, the suspects were arrested and faced 6 charges, including first-degree murder, second-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and illegal possession of a weapon. Charlene was charged with manslaughter and illegal possession of a weapon, while Braun was charged with being an accessory. Charlene confessed to the crime and cooperated with police in hopes of receiving a lighter sentence. However, her help was insignificant, as police had enough evidence to file charges. Notably, a ski mask found by the dogs contained Tim's DNA, which was confirmed by forensic analysis. Tim Dean, the shooter, consistently claimed he was innocent, but ultimately, he was found guilty on all charges and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Throughout the trial, hearings, and sentencing, Tim remained calm and showed no signs of regret or remorse. He did not engage with the victim's family at all. Tim is currently serving his sentence at Clinton Correctional Facility in New York State. Braun Bowler, who was involved in the case, received a 3-year sentence but was released after serving 16 months. Charlene was convicted and sentenced to prison. However, because she assisted the police, her sentence was reduced to 28 years, far less than the maximum possible sentence. She is eligible for parole in 2042 and is currently incarcerated at the Belford Hills Correctional Facility for Women in New York. Charlene's sister received custody of her 2 children, and Amber's parents received custody of the deceased couple's son. Out that the boy had autism, so the grandparents had to learn to raise a special child. Hello again, true crime fans, we've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Annie Tayan. Annie Tayan, born May 1, 1965, was raised by her mother and has a lively personality. She loves to dance, play, and appreciate the simple pleasures of life. Annie cherished the dream of a large family, considering motherhood her main aspiration. She became a mother at a young age, giving birth to her first son, Jimia, when she was 18 and her second son, Sean, just a year later. When she turned 20, she had a daughter named Shane. Unfortunately, shortly after Shane was born, the children's father left Annie and chose not to be involved in their lives, leaving her with the hardships of single motherhood. Annie managed a household of 3 young children while living in a rented apartment in Maine. In 1987, when her youngest daughter, Shane, was just 6 months old, 22-year-old Annie began a new chapter in her life. She met Michael Palin, 32, a Navy officer stationed on the aircraft carrier Bramby. Their meeting took place in Portland, Maine, where Michael's ship was docked, and he felt a strong attraction to Annie during their waterfront encounter. Originally from Charleston, South Carolina, Michael was a respected Navy member, best known for his work as a computer systems operator. He was actively involved in military operations and received several awards for his service. Annie found Michael's Navy career impressive and quickly fell in love, telling a friend that he was the man she believed was truly worthy of her affections. After a few months of dating, Annie and Michael decided to move in together, starting a family with 2 sons and a daughter. Unfortunately, their lives changed completely when a fire broke out in their apartment. Annie was out at the time, leaving Michael at home with the children. Michael, along with Jimia and Sean, escaped, but Shane, who was too young to walk, was left behind. When Annie returned, she tried to enter the burning apartment to rescue Shane but was stopped by neighbors. The loss of Shane had a profound impact on Annie, who felt that the tragedy had left an irreplaceable void in her heart. As the police investigated the fire, they struggled to determine the exact cause of the fire. The circumstances surrounding the fire aroused the police's suspicions. However, the investigation ended without anyone being held accountable. After the tragedy, Annie and her sons moved into her mother's home in Portland, while Michael focused on his work and chose to live in the barracks. A few months after the move, another disturbing event occurred near Annie's mother's home. A shed in the backyard caught fire. Police quickly tracked down the source of the fire and found a lighter engraved with the word Bramby, the name of the ship where Michael worked. This evidence made Michael the prime suspect in the arson case. However, police were unable to conclusively prove his involvement due to insufficient evidence. After the second fire, child welfare agencies in Maine assessed that Annie Tayan's sons were living in an unsafe environment. As a result, they made the difficult decision to remove Jimia and Sean from her custody and place them in the foster care system under the Department of Social Services. This decision devastated Annie as she desperately tried to regain custody of her sons. Despite her efforts, she was unsuccessful, leaving her heartbroken and separated from her sons. When Michael returned to Charleston, South Carolina, he settled into a rental apartment and rekindled his relationship with Annie. Despite their complicated past, Annie agreed to move in with him in Goose Creek, a suburb of Charleston. However, her time there changed when she discovered a photo of Michael wearing a wedding ring, indicating that he was married. When confronted about it, Michael confessed that he had been married once but had long since divorced. He explained that his ex-wife, Dawn Breeze, and their 3 children lived at his mother's house in Savannah, Georgia. Although Michael assured Annie that there was no ongoing relationship with Dawn, she felt uneasy about the information. Annie considered leaving him, but decided to stay, believing that he might be the right partner to start a family with. Unfortunately, their life together soon turned sour. As Michael's behavior toward Annie became increasingly hostile and demeaning. Annie, who was planning to return to her mother's home, discovered that she was pregnant. This news caused her to put her plans on hold because she was excited about having another child. In October 1989, just a month before she went missing, Annie gave birth to her 4th daughter, Jade. Although she understood that Jade could never replace her lost daughter, she felt that Jade had brought great joy to her life. Unfortunately, a month after Jade was born, Michael's treatment of Annie took a turn for the worse. He began to publicly insult and humiliate her. Annie shared her concerns with a friend, expressing her fear that Michael would relentlessly pursue her if she tried to leave. His controlling behavior became more intense. He isolated Annie in their apartment while he was at work by disconnecting his phone, keeping it in his bag, and carrying it with him. Annie became increasingly frightened by Michael's actions. Just 2 days before her disappearance, Annie called her close friend Katie French in a distressed state. During the call, Annie revealed her plans to leave Michael. However, Michael threatened her by saying that if she left, he would keep their daughter Jade with him, preventing Annie from seeing her daughter again. Annie was in a distressed state, crying and begging Katie to come to her and Jade's aid. Unfortunately, Katie was busy and unable to help her. Instead, she sent Annie money for a bus ticket, hoping that it would allow her to escape and return to Portland. This emotional conversation would be their last. 2 days later, on November 7, 1989, Katie attempted to contact Annie but received no response. A few days later, Michael contacted Katie to inform her that on November 6, Annie had packed up and left without saying where she was going. Katie expected Annie to contact her from her new home. But after 2 weeks of silence, she began to worry. By Thanksgiving on November 24, Annie had been out of contact for 20 days. Worried about her friend, Katie contacted all of Annie's friends, but no one had any information about her whereabouts. Katie attempted to report 24-year-old Annie missing to the police, but was told that, since she was not a blood relative, she could not file a formal report. As months passed without any sign of Annie, Katie finally got Michael's mother's phone number. When she called, she was shocked to learn that Annie's youngest daughter, Jade, was staying with Michael's mother. The news confirmed Katie's worst fears. She believed that Annie would never want to leave her daughter. Shortly after this disturbing news, Michael was transferred to the naval base at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. Despite the situation of Annie, the mother of his child, he showed little concern for her whereabouts. Michael did not contact the police or begin searching for her. Months after Annie Tayan went missing, an official search began following a report from her mother. The investigation quickly focused on her partner, Michael Palin, who became the prime suspect. Michael claimed that on the morning of November 6th, he woke up to find Annie had left while he was babysitting his daughter. He said that the night before, Annie had expressed a desire to end their relationship. He made no attempt to find her, believing that their relationship was over and that further contact was pointless. Michael also claimed that he was unaware that Annie had been reported missing or that she had lost contact with family and friends. When police searched the couple's rented apartment, they found no evidence, no clues, traces, or suspicious items that could help the investigation. Annie Tayan's case seemed to have stalled and no large-scale search was conducted for her. It is still unclear whether she is still alive, and any possible motive for her disappearance is unknown. The only confirmed detail is that the last person reported to have seen her was her partner, Michael. For 4 long years, there were no updates or discoveries about Annie. Her close friend Katie French was the only one actively searching for her, cooperating tirelessly with the investigation. Katie spent approximately $16,000 on phone bills alone and hired a private investigator as part of her relentless quest to find Annie Tayan. She contacted various organizations in the hopes of uncovering information about Michael's past. Katie was convinced that Michael was dangerous and untrustworthy. She feared him greatly, knowing that if he discovered her involvement with the police, it could put her in danger. In 1993, Annie's case took a major turn when it was transferred to the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, NCIS, marking a major turning point in the investigation. NCIS agents began a full review of the case from the beginning. They located Michael, who was stationed at Pearl Harbor Naval Station in Hawaii. When approached by Marine Corps police officers to discuss Annie's disappearance, Michael agreed to talk, but only in the presence of his attorney. He then completely stopped cooperating with the investigation and refused to provide further information. The Coast Guard gathered every available detail about Annie's disappearance and contacted South Carolina police. They asked for help in comparing their information with the records of the unidentified bodies, noting that Annie had given birth just a month before her disappearance. Then, South Carolina police reported a case involving a dead woman who had also given birth a month before her death. They sent a sketch of the woman, which shocked Coast Guard agents who saw it. They believed they might have found Annie Tayan. The discovery revealed a horrific murder. Annie's body was found near a highway in Jasper County, South Carolina, about 100 miles from where she lived with Michael. The crime scene photos were horrifying, showing a level of violence that agents said they had rarely witnessed. Annie's face was severely damaged and her skull was broken into 124 pieces, requiring nearly 500 hours of detailed reconstruction. It was also revealed that Annie's body had been placed in a navy blue bag that had been doused with gasoline and then set on fire. The burning bag was discovered at 6 a.m. on November 7, 1989, around the same time Katie French realized Annie had stopped answering her phone calls. Annie Tayan's dental records were used to positively identify her as the unidentified woman. After Annie's body was found, Michael became the prime suspect in the murder. Coast Guard agents developed a thorough investigation plan, starting with a review of his financial transactions. They discovered that on the day Annie went missing, Michael made a credit card purchase about 25 miles south of where her burned body was found. Additionally, his phone records showed that on the morning of November 6th, he called his mother's home in Savannah twice, the first time at 4:35 a.m. and the second time at 5:17 a.m. Coast Guard agents believe that Michael killed Annie in their apartment and then moved her body to the side of the road, where he set it on fire. To advance the investigation, NCIS agents targeted Michael's ex-wife, Dawn Breeze. At the time of Annie's death, Dawn was still married to Michael and living at his mother's house in Savannah. After Annie's disappearance, Dawn divorced Michael and began moving frequently between states, as if she were trying to escape someone or something. The agents eventually discovered that she was living in Miami, Florida, in the summer of 1995, nearly 6 years after Annie's murder. They located Dawn, who had been engaging in spiritualistic activities for income. When the agents visited Dawn at her workplace to discuss Annie's disappearance, her response was surprisingly calm. She questioned the length of the conversation, expressing a desire to eat if the conversation was prolonged. This response surprised the agents, who had expected a more emotional response when Annie was mentioned. Dawn, however, remained calm throughout their conversation. During the 10-hour interrogation, Dawn's story initially matched Michael's. She said that when she visited Michael's apartment, he told her that his mistress had left him and that he planned to raise his daughter alone. However, there were discrepancies in the timeline of her visit. At one point, Dawn became quiet, looked down, and expressed a desire to tell the truth. Her subsequent speech was emotionless and tearless as she revealed what she had kept secret for 6 years. Dawn explained that one morning, Michael had called her urgently to his apartment in Charleston. There, she saw Annie's dead body on the living room floor. Michael then told Dawn to go into the bedroom to see his daughter. At the time, Dawn and Michael were still legally married and had 3 children together. Michael admitted to having an affair with Annie, which resulted in the birth of a daughter. He begged Dawn to accept the child and help him raise her. Dawn suggested that Michael, not wanting to fight for custody of Annie, had chosen murder as a simpler solution. On the night of November 5 to 6, 1989, Michael and Annie went to bed after having an intimate moment. Annie soon fell asleep, and during this time, Michael picked up a crowbar and began to violently attack her. Shockingly, their daughter Jade was sleeping next to Annie during the attack. Michael continued to hit Annie in the head more violently, and although she tried to fight back, she eventually died of her injuries in their bed. Michael then contacted his wife Dawn and asked her to come over immediately. He placed Annie's body in a duffel bag and placed it in the trunk of his car, along with a can of gasoline. He then put Dawn and Jade in the back seat of his car and drove about 100 miles. When he found a secluded spot along the side of the road, he took Annie's body out of the trunk, doused it with gasoline, and set it on fire. Once the fire was out, he quickly got back in the car and drove Dawn and Jade back to his mother's house in Savannah. Dawn's revelations marked a major turning point in the investigation, marking the first significant piece of evidence since the discovery of Annie's remains. Police asked Dawn to make a recorded phone call to her ex-husband, Michael, to discuss Annie's murder. Dawn agreed and contacted Michael, saying she needed to have a serious conversation because Annie's body had been found. Michael's response, "No, they didn't," confirmed to police that Dawn's account was credible. During the call, Dawn mentioned that blood had been discovered in their old apartment and that NCIS was investigating them as suspects in the murder. She urged Michael to come up with an explanation for the blood. Michael responded, "Okay, we need to work together and come up with something," which did not include any direct admission of guilt. However, his tone suggested that he understood the seriousness of the situation. He did not ask unnecessary questions or deny involvement, indicating that he knew what was being discussed. This conversation further supported the theory that Annie was murdered in Michael's apartment. At the end of the conversation, Michael warned Dawn to be careful with her phone calls and assured her that they would work together to resolve the situation. NCIS agents took Dawn to the crime scene to search for any remaining evidence. To protect her identity and ensure her safety as a cooperating witness, they disguised her before arriving at the apartment. Dawn carefully described and demonstrated the location of Annie's body and a sequence of events. She pointed out a spot near the wall and baseboard where a large amount of blood had seeped into the carpet and concrete floor below. Since Michael moved out, The landlord had replaced and cleaned the carpet several times, which is why there were no visible traces of blood. However, when the police used a special chemical on the concrete floor, a large purple stain appeared, indicating the presence of protein and matching Dawn's description of where Annie's body had been. Although the blood had soaked into the concrete, NCIS still had difficulty proving with certainty that the substance was blood. Therefore, the search for more physical evidence continued. Dawn mentioned a dresser next to the bed where Annie was killed, which contained a television covered in blood from the murder. Michael had said that the television needed a thorough cleaning because of the stains. He had then thrown it away, presumably selling it rather than throwing away a working device. Given his thrifty tendencies, finding the television was difficult. However, the agents were determined to find it. At this point, Michael realized that NCIS was watching him, especially after a phone call with his ex-wife, Dawn. Realizing this, he became very wary of their surveillance. NCIS agents were concerned that Michael might attempt to escape, threaten witnesses, or possibly harm someone. During a surveillance mission, Michael attempted to escape from the police, but was quickly apprehended by the police. As a result, on October 11, 1995, he was arrested. While he was being held in a military prison on suspicion of murder, NCIS agents interviewed all the residents of the apartment complex where the murders took place in November 1989. 3 months later, their efforts finally paid off when a neighbor revealed that he had purchased a television from Michael. Amazingly, the television was still working and in his home. The police quickly confiscated the television and sent it to the FBI lab for detailed forensic analysis. This examination led to a major breakthrough. They found 11 bloodstains on the speaker, which were later determined to match Annie's DNA, providing a key piece of evidence in the murder investigation. At this point in the case, Michael's attorney announced that he was willing to plead guilty, but only if the death penalty was dropped. Although the prosecutor was not happy with this development, military law required such deals to be considered at trial. Michael admitted his guilt without showing much emotion, recounting the details of his crime. His story showed no signs of remorse or sorrow. Michael Palin was convicted and sentenced to life in prison, eligible for parole after 30 years. Although Dawn knew about her husband's crimes and kept quiet for 6 years, she avoided legal consequences because her confession to NCIS was crucial in moving the investigation forward. Annie's children, including her son and daughter, now know what happened to their biological mother and understand that she did not abandon them. Jade, Annie's daughter with Michael, has grown into a beautiful woman. In a surprising turn of events, Michael Palin was released from prison in 2013 after serving only 17 years, supposedly for good behavior. His whereabouts are currently unknown and anyone who sees him is advised to exercise caution. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Amy Widener. Amy Widener was born in 1973 into a large family. She has an older brother, John Paul, who is 1 year older than her, and 2 younger sisters, Tiny and Cassie, who are 1 and 4 years younger. Their mother, Gloria Widener, raised the children alone after divorcing her father, who was absent from their lives. The family lived in a house in Indianapolis. Amy often acted as her mother's maid, taking on responsibilities such as cooking, cleaning, and caring for her younger sisters. A diligent student, Amy aspired to become a teacher and was known for her bright, cheerful personality and charming smile. At the age of 14, Amy's life changed dramatically when she became pregnant. She was afraid to tell her mother and tried to hide her growing belly by wearing loose clothing. For more than 5 months, her family did not realize she was pregnant. However, as she approached her 6th month, keeping the secret became more difficult. Amy finally found the courage to tell her mother. She burst into tears and said, "Mommy, I don't want you to hate me." Her mother, Gloria, was shocked but held her daughter close, comforting her despite feeling overwhelmed and uncertain about the future. "I was so shocked, I couldn't believe it. I thought it was the worst thing that could have happened to me." Amy Widener's child was born to Tony Abercrombie, a 20-year-old friend of her brother. Their relationship was kept secret and no one in the family knew about their intimate relationship. When Amy's mother, Gloria, learned of her daughter's pregnancy, she took immediate action. She banned all contact between Amy and Tony and ordered Amy to completely cut ties with the father of her unborn child, setting strict rules for her future relationships. On October 25, 1987, Amy became a mother when she gave birth to her daughter Emily. Remarkably, just 6 days later, Amy returned to school, balancing her motherhood and academic responsibilities. Gloria Widener understood the importance of education to Amy's future and was always supportive and caring to help Amy with her studies. She also recognized Amy's need for a normal teenage life and time with her friends. Despite the challenges of motherhood, Amy was determined to study, receiving praise from her teachers for her hard work and dedication. Amy's family adapted well to having Emily in their lives and shared the responsibility of caring for her. Over time, things seemed to improve, especially for Amy, who was overcoming her challenges. Just when they felt stable, things took an unexpected turn. On November 13, 1989, 16-year-old Amy Widener woke up with a severe sore throat and decided to stay home from school with her 2-year-old daughter Emily. When her mother, Gloria, offered to take Emily to a babysitter, Amy decided to keep her daughter with her. After the family had breakfast, they parted ways for the day. Gloria went to work, while Amy's siblings went to school, leaving Amy and Emily at home. When Gloria could not reach Amy by phone at 9:30 a.m. and several hours later, she became concerned. She asked a neighbor to check on them. The neighbor reported that the house was quiet and unresponsive, prompting Gloria to leave work and rush home. When she arrived, she found Emily sitting on the stairs and called Amy, but there was no answer. Gloria entered Amy's bedroom. The situation in Amy's bedroom was both tragic and shocking. Amy was found dead and naked on the bed, with a lot of blood around her. Gloria called 911 in a panic. When the police arrived, they conducted a thorough search of Amy's house. At first, they suspected a break-in. They found that several stereo devices and a graphic equalizer, owned by Amy's brother, John Paul, were missing. Additionally, a piggy bank in Amy's room, a glass jar containing about $50 for school, was also missing. There was no sign of forced entry. The perpetrator may have entered through an unlocked back door or front door, or it was likely that Amy herself opened it. Key evidence was found in Amy's room, a bloody handprint on the wall and several hairs, both from her body and head, that were likely from her attacker. The medical examiner determined that Amy Widener had been hit in the head with a sharp object, sexually assaulted, and finally strangled. It is disturbing to think that Amy's 2-year-old daughter, Emily, may have witnessed these tragic events. Fortunately, she was found safe and unharmed. The police realized that Emily, although only 2 years old, might have valuable information. To help her feel comfortable, they used finger puppets while gently asking her questions about what she remembered. During this interaction, Emily, who was active in the room, only said that her mother seemed very angry that day. To collect evidence, the police collected the attacker's bloody fingerprints. They also collected the victim's clothes and bed linens from the crime scene to assist in the investigation of this tragic event. During the investigation of Amy's case, the police conducted inquiries among family, friends, and nearby residents. John Paul, Amy's 17-year-old brother, was also questioned by the police. However, he had a credible alibi and no evidence linked him to the incident. Tony Abier, Amy's ex-boyfriend and Emily's father, was also questioned. He expressed his deep love for Amy and denied any intention to harm her, and provided a strong alibi for the day of the murder. Police also investigated Troy Jackson, who lived next door to Amy and knew about a stereo system that had been stolen on the day of the murder. Troy denied any involvement and had no visible injuries. He provided hair samples that did not match those found at the crime scene and was cleared of suspicion after passing a polygraph test. In addition to the three main witnesses, police also spoke to Amy's other friends, neighbors, and classmates. They collected fingerprints and hair samples from all of them, but none of them were considered suspicious. Amy Widener's funeral, which took place shortly after her death, drew large crowds to pay their respects. Her passing had a profound impact on the community. Police were present at the funeral, discreetly observing attendees as part of their investigation. One particularly touching moment was the display of a beloved photograph of Amy, in which she wore her favorite white floral turtleneck. It was in this precious garment that Amy, a young girl whose life ended too soon, was laid to rest. After the tragic loss, Amy's family still held out hope that her killer would be caught and brought to justice. However, as the days passed, weeks and months passed, no suspects emerged. After Amy's death, Gloria Widener took in her niece Emily, taking on the role of her mother. The grief and fear weighed heavily on Gloria, as she was constantly haunted by thoughts of the killer and worried about her family's safety. She never left her daughter home alone and lived in a constant state of anxiety as the attacker remained at large. Although Gloria considered moving to a safer home, financial constraints left them with no choice, forcing them to endure these difficult times in their current home. Amy's friends were also deeply affected by the tragedy, fearing that they could be the criminal's next target. They asked their parents to guard the house, even boarded up the windows to prevent a similar incident. One day, Gloria returned home, expecting to find her younger daughters home from school. Instead, she found only eerie silence. The house was strangely empty. She saw the girls' outdoor shoes in their usual place, which worried her. With each step upstairs, her mind raced with terrifying thoughts of what could have happened. By the time she reached the bedroom door, Gloria braced herself for the worst. When she entered the bedroom, she was relieved to find her daughters asleep. As time passed, Amy's daughter, Emily, grew up without the burden of memories of the tragic events involving her biological mother. She had no recollection of the police interviews or being told about her mother's death. However, the police would occasionally return to check on Amy's family, inadvertently reminding them of the pain of that terrible day. Gloria revealed that, at some point, the constant reminders of the past became too much for her to bear. All she wanted was for the police to stop reopening old wounds and for her family to find peace, because nothing could bring Amy back. 13 years after Amy Wagner was murdered in 2002, something unexpected happened. The Indianapolis Police Department received a call from a 29-year-old man who claimed he had a dream in which Amy spoke to him about her death. He shared some details about the murder, but most of what he said had already been reported in the newspaper. The police investigated the man, who was 16 at the time and lived across the street from Amy. They ran his fingerprints and DNA to see if he had any connection to the case, but found no matches, so he was released. Although his call did not provide any new evidence, it did lead police back to the cold case. In 2002, they reconnected with some of Amy's friends and acquaintances, especially those who had been in legal trouble over the years. However, despite these new efforts, the investigation hit a dead end again, leaving the case unsolved. In 2011, a Facebook group called Remembering Amy was created by Amy's friends, which sparked interest in her unsolved murder. The police officer working the cold case was unfamiliar with Facebook, so he asked his colleague, Officer Bill Carter, to print out information from the group. This assignment piqued Bill's interest in the case. Although his background was in non-homicide crimes, he felt motivated to review Amy's murder case file in his spare time. Bill thoroughly examined the case, which was more than 20 years old. He reviewed every detail in the file, reassessed the evidence, checked school attendance records from the day of the murder, and analyzed Amy's funeral attendance list. He entered the case information into a database and discovered leads that had been overlooked, including several friends of Amy's brother who had never been interviewed by police and whose DNA had not been collected. In an effort to find new leads, Bill contacted Amy's family and friends in 2011 to collect the names of people who might have information about the case. Bill began collecting DNA samples from people who had been overlooked in the original investigation in 1989. After the murder, police surveyed the neighborhood where Amy lived and recorded the names of residents. Bill returned to these records and the area to check to see if any residents were still living at their original addresses. His investigation led him to a woman who lived across the street from the murder scene and was a neighbor and friend of Amy's. She struggled to recall the names of the boys Amy had befriended. While she recalled most of the names that had already been identified and investigated, she also mentioned a name that Bill had never heard before: Rodney Dink. In 2012, Bill received permission from the Cold Case Unit to officially investigate the Amy Widener case. His first task was to find Rodney Dink to determine if he was a suspect. Amy's family knew Rodney well because he was friends with Amy's brother, John Paul. They often spent time together biking and fishing. When Bill asked John Paul about Rodney, he described him as a quiet, mostly private person who had never aroused suspicion. Bill then went to the home of Rodney Dink, 40, who lived with his mother near Amy's family. Rodney worked at an auto parts store and had been divorced for some time. He had an adult son with whom he had little contact. When Bill arrived at Rodney's home, his mother answered the door and told him that Rodney was at work. Bill left his business card, asking Rodney to call him when he got home. That evening, Rodney called Bill, who quickly arranged a meeting to discuss Amy's murder case. Rodney agreed to meet and invited Bill to his home. However, when Bill returned to Rodney's home, Rodney was missing. Bill looked into Rodney's criminal history and discovered he had been convicted of assault in 1991 and burglary in 1997. Rodney's fingerprints were in the database, so they compared them to the fingerprints found at Amy's house. The purpose of the comparison was to either link or clear Rodney of the crime. The results showed that Rodney's fingerprints matched the bloody fingerprints at the crime scene. After 23 years, a suspect was identified, but Rodney disappeared from the house, leading to a search for him. The investigation took a turn when Rodney's credit card activity showed that he had rented a car equipped with an OnStar tracking system. The police tracked the car to Indianapolis, where Rodney was hiding at a friend's house. When confronted by the police, Rodney threatened them with a knife, claiming his innocence. In the ensuing chaos, he injured himself and attempted to attack police, but was eventually subdued with a taser, handcuffed and taken to hospital. During a 2-day police interrogation that was filmed, Rodney admitted to killing Amy. He said he intended to break into the house and had not expected Amy to come home because she was sick. Rodney described how he entered through a sliding glass door and was surprised by Amy, who attacked him, causing him to panic. In his haste, he picked up the nearest object and hit her in the head, tragically killing her. Over the course of 2 days, he spoke of his vague memories of that day, explaining that it had been 23 years since the murder. His description of the events was vague. At one point, he mentioned going to Amy's house with someone he called Bag. However, Rodney struggled to recall specific details about this friend, including his appearance. He said that Bag waited outside Amy's house before going inside, where the two confronted Amy. When asked about Emily, Rodney said that he did not see her during the incident and was unaware of her presence or crying, not realizing that Emily had been nearby throughout the entire incident. During questioning, Rodney remained calm and respectful, showing none of the typical signs of a murderer. Due to the time that had passed since the crime, His DNA was collected and, as expected, matched semen found on Amy's bedsheets and blankets in 1989. In a rare moment of honesty, Rodney told police, "I always tried to be a good person, but I guess deep down inside I'm not." Both fingerprints and semen at the crime scene were confirmed to be his, and there was no evidence that anyone else was involved. Rodney's confession shocked Amy's family. The quiet and unassuming man was also a close friend and classmate of Amy's brother, John Paul, who lived across the street and frequently visited their home. With the horrific crime he had committed. In a surprising twist, Rodney even attended Amy's funeral, grieving with the others and sending condolences to Gloria Widener. Police bill later found Rodney's name in the funeral book from the funeral. It wasn't until he reviewed the case that he remembered Rodney being mentioned in 2003 by Tony Abercrombie, Amy's ex-boyfriend and Emily's biological father, who noted Rodney's frequent visits to Amy's family. Bill believes that in 1989, Rodney was never considered a suspect or questioned at the time. While investigating Rodney's past in 2012, police discovered another disturbing fact: Rodney's biological son, Dylan Dink, had been imprisoned for a crime committed in 2009. At the age of 16, Dylan killed his mother, Mary McHenry, after claiming that he acted in response to her abuse and insults. He used a baseball bat to inflict the fatal wounds. Tragically, Mary died from her injuries, and Dylan turned 17 just days after the incident. This situation was very similar to Rodney's own past, as he was only 18 when he killed Amy. The similarities between father and son committing serious crimes at a young age made police nervous. Rodney had little involvement in Dylan's upbringing, having divorced Mary early on and leaving her to raise her son alone. However, he attended Dylan's trial in 2009. Dylan accepted a plea deal that resulted in a 20-year prison sentence, meaning he was scheduled to be released in 2029 when he would be 37. In the case of Amy Widener, Rodney initially claimed that Bagg was his accomplice in the crime. However, just 10 days before his trial was set to begin in June 2013, 42-year-old Rodney changed his story and confessed to killing Amy himself, saying no one else was involved. Due to his confession and the evidence against him, Rodney was sentenced to 65 years in prison in 2013. After the case was over, Amy's family held a reunion with police officer Bill Carter to remember the 24 years without her. They released 24 balloons into the sky in her honor and expressed gratitude to Officer Bill for his essential contributions to the case. Officer Bill identified Rodney Dink as the perpetrator after only 12 days of investigation, essentially closing the case. In recognition of his exceptional efforts, Detective Bill Carter received an award from the Indianapolis Police Department in January 2014. Although he was offered a position in the homicide division, he decided to stay in his current role. Amy's daughter, Emily, grew up and graduated from the same high school her mother attended. She then went on to attend college. In search of more opportunities, she moved from Indianapolis to California. Amy's mother, Gloria, has publicly expressed her ongoing grief and daily remembrance of her daughter. She still lives in the house where the tragedy occurred, with Amy's room still decorated with pictures of her. The space now also welcomes Gloria's grandchildren for holiday visits, bringing joy and new life to a place once filled with sadness. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Carly McBride. Carly McBride was born on April 14, 1983, to Steve McBride and Lorraine. As a child, she was cheerful and outgoing, sharing a close bond with her parents. However, as an adult, Carly began to experience many difficulties, which led to her abusing alcohol and drugs. Despite these challenges, she worked hard to overcome her addictions. By 2014, Carly was 31 years old and living in Belmont, New South Wales, Australia. She was a mother to 2 children, William, who was 7, and Cadence, who was 3. The children's fathers were different men. It is known that Andrew Easton, the father of Cadence, was one of the last people to see Carly. In 2013, Carly entered a rehab center to get rid of her addiction. During her time there, she met Sale Kenneth Newson, and their friendship gradually developed into a deeper relationship. Starting in August 2014, Carly and Sale spent nearly all their time together. Although they occasionally had arguments, they appeared happy overall. On September 30, 2014, Sale took Carly to Musselbrook to visit her 3-year-old daughter, Cadence, who lived with her father, Andrew Easton. Carly visited Cadence for a few hours, entering Andrew's house around 12:30 p.m. Sale did not stay with her, but they agreed that he would return in a few hours. However, when Sale arrived to pick up Carly, she was missing. Carly's ex-husband, Andrew, mentioned they had a fight, which led Carly to leave. She intended to walk to the nearest McDonald's, about a 20-minute walk from Andrew's house. Sale, confused as to why Carly hadn't called to inform him of her whereabouts, he began trying to reach her by phone. After several unsuccessful attempts, he decided to drive to McDonald's, hoping to find her there. During the drive, he looked around in case Carly was waiting somewhere along the way. He thought it was possible her phone had died, but Carly was not at McDonald's or anywhere nearby. Sale drove around the streets of Musselbrook for a while, but he couldn't find Carly. When she didn't come home to Belmont that evening, he contacted the police. The detectives asked him to describe what had happened. Sale explained that he would drop Carly off, and she would walk to the front door with her daughter, turn around, and wave goodbye. He mentioned that she would usually call him twice and send him 2 texts during each visit to let him know she was okay. However, he noted that on that day, he dropped her off around 12:30 p.m., and everything felt different. He did not hear from her again at all. He texted and called her, but the phone kept ringing, and she didn't answer it. Sale arrived at Carly's ex-husband, Andrew's house around 4:30 p.m., as he usually did, to pick up she. However, Andrew told him that she had left after an argument at around 2 p.m. and walked toward a McDonald's about a mile away. This raised an important question: did Carly really leave Andrew's house, or was he withholding information? Andrew claimed to be the last person to see her, but there were no other witnesses to confirm that Carly left. The police spoke with neighbors and others along the route she might have taken to McDonald's, but since no one saw her, suspicion about Andrew increases. There are no surveillance cameras near Andrew's house that could verify his statement about Carly leaving at around 2 p.m. Investigators also reviewed footage from surveillance cameras at McDonald's but found no evidence that she had been there. The police conducted searches in fields behind a nearby residential area for clues, but the chief investigator stated that nothing lead had been discovered. The investigation will continue, and the police are asking anyone with information about Carly McBride's disappearance to come forward. She was last seen in blue jeans, sandals, and a yellow t-shirt, carrying a tan handbag. After getting a search warrant, the police searched the house Andrew, where Carly was last seen. A team of officers hoped to find clues about the disappearance of she. However, their search of Andrew's house revealed no new evidence. There was no sign that anyone had committed a crime in that house. Despite this, investigators found something concerning. Carly's Facebook account was deleted just hours after she went missing, before an official report was filed. This deletion sparked many questions. Are Carly's account deletion and her disappearance related? Did she delete her account herself, or did someone else do it? What was the reason for the account deletion? The Facebook messages might hold clues about what happened, which could explain why the account was removed. To find answers, detectives reached out to the U.S. Department of Justice, seeking assistance to recover Carly's account and identify who deleted it. Although Facebook data analysis is conducted at their headquarters in Menlo Park, California, Sergeant Wright mentioned that Carly's Facebook friends could also provide useful information. The New South Wales police are asking if anyone had contact with Carly on Facebook or other social media platforms in the days before her disappearance. They are looking for anyone who noticed something unusual and are encouraging them to come forward with information. Carly's parents doubted that she simply ran away to start a new life. Her close friend and roommate, Kylie Smith, mentioned that everything seemed normal when she spoke with Carly on the phone while on her way to Musselbrook. Kylie described Carly as very relatable and a free spirit. She was easygoing and loved life. She was always supportive of her friends. If someone was having a tough day, she could sense it and reach out. Kylie said that, every day they wake up not knowing what happened or where Carly is. Please, have some conscience and come forward with any information. They just need something to hold on to. The police conducted a comprehensive search of the area where Carly was last seen before she disappeared. This search involved search dogs, police divers checking the Hunter River and nearby locations, as well as aerial surveillance and patrols on trail bikes. Unfortunately, this did not lead to any clues as to Carly's whereabouts. As months went by, the investigation yielded no results. Carly left no traces after her disappearance. She did not turn on her phone, her social media accounts remained inactive, and she did not use any bank cards. Investigators started to fear that Carly may no longer be alive. 9 months after Carly went missing, her parents asked for help in locating their daughter. They were assisted by Detective Timothy Seymour, who could gather any information that might aid the investigation. Carly's mother, Lorraine, wept during the public appeal and begged for help to find her beloved daughter. She urged that if anyone knew anything, no matter how small, they should come forward and help family her. Detective Inspector Timothy Seymour stated that officers have been working hard since Carly went missing. He explained that they had a lot of information to review but were still asking for help. He also said that important information can come from a person, even if they think what they know is unimportant. As time passed, Carly's parents began to accept that they might never see their daughter alive again. Lorraine wrote a touching letter to the man who took her daughter from her. I believe everyone knows what happened to my girl or has seen the events of that tragic day. Please help us for her children. They are innocent and beautiful babies. Whoever you are, you have taken their mother away, their source of joy and happiness, their pillar of strength. Lorraine wrote a heartfelt letter to the man who kidnapped Carly. In her letter, she stressed that, no matter who he was, he had removed their mother from their lives, which took away their joy, happiness. They will never experience Carly gentle, warm kisses or her comforting hugs, or see her bright smile. Their cherished memories are gone, and they cannot say goodbye to her. Lorraine speaker that sorrow, anger, and frustration weighed heavily on them. After failing to find Andrew's involvement in Carly's disappearance, the police begin investigating another suspect, Sale Newson. They discovered that Carly and Sale's relationship was troubled, primarily due to Sale's jealousy, which often led to arguments. Although they have only been together for a relatively short time, but Sale insists that he loves Carly very much, saying that she is the first woman he has truly loved in 14 years. He urgently sought information about Carly's disappearance, helped create a Facebook page, offered rewards, and approached people in the area where she was last seen. Despite publicly expressing his love for Carly, but Sale quickly began intimate relationships with other women. Just hours after reporting Carly missing, he propositioned several women for sex. Carly went missing on September 30th, but by October 2nd, and Sale was spending the night with another woman. Yet publicly, he portrayed himself as a heartbroken individual mourning the loss of his girlfriend. Detectives found out that Sale and Carly had a disagreement 2 days before she went missing. The argument was about Facebook messages that Carly received from other men. However, this information was only circumstantial evidence, and they needed more direct evidence to file any charges against Sale Newson. In April 2015, authorities conducted searches at 3 locations, 1 in Muswellbrook and 2 in Scone, a town in the Upper Hunter Shire of New South Wales, Australia. Scone is located approximately 15 miles from Muswellbrook. During these searches, police confiscated 3 firearms and a quantity of illegal substances, leading to the arrest of a 24-year-old man named James Anthony Canine. Although the police stated that these charges were not connected to the ongoing investigation into Carly's disappearance, they surfaced during the investigation. Therefore, it's important to remember this name. Almost 2 years had passed since Carly was last seen alive, and the police were still investigating her case without any new leads. However, on August 7, 2016, there was a lead new. In a rural area near Scone, 2 local pedestrians discovered remains in a shallow grave just a few feet off the road. Forensic analysis confirmed that these remains belonged to Carly McBride, a mother of 2 from Belmont who had disappeared on September 30, 2014, in Muswellbrook. Police delayed announcing the discovery of her body for 4 days in the hope of gathering more evidence. Superintendent Guyana emphasized that the police do not think Carly, 31, was taken from the street by a stranger. He stated that this was not a random act, and they were investigating her past and reaching out to as many people as possible. He refrained from naming any suspects, noting that the investigation was still in its early stages. Superintendent Guyana said that they have worked hard on this case over the past 2 years and the team is eager to find answers for Carly's family, added that they still have a lot of new information to process, and the case is still making good progress. Carly's parents have been desperately searching for information about their daughter's case. Lorraine has asked anyone who knows anything to come forward, as they want to find out who is responsible for her death. Finding Carly's body has given them some sense of closure. They are very grateful for the support from law enforcement and the community throughout the search. After 10 months of diligent investigation, a warrant was issued for Sale Newson's arrest on June 19, 2017. He has since been arrested and is in custody, but he denies any involvement in Carly's death. However, Sale was not the only person facing charges. Police suspect that 26-year-old James assisted Sale in disposing of Carly's body. Sale and James met at a rehabilitation center for individuals struggling with alcohol and substance abuse. Although they left the center at different times and for different reasons, they maintained contact afterward. Sale Newson's trial started in August 2018 and extended over several years due to the police only having circumstantial evidence. Prosecutors claimed that Sale met Carly after she left Andrew's house, attacked her in a fit of jealousy, and then disposed of her body. Forensic experts concluded that Carly died from multiple blunt force trauma, which included 23 skull fractures, 13 torso fractures, and injuries to her spine and ribs. The judge pointed out that Sale had claimed to the police that he was an experienced mixed martial arts fighter, boasting that he had had 20 fights and had won them all, and that he had trained with world champions. The judge determined that the cause of death was severe brain trauma resulting from significant force applied to Carly's head, concluding that he was convinced Sale had caused her death using his fists, feet, or potentially both, as well as objects. During their search of Sale's house, police discovered a map inside a shoebox under the bed. The map featured a circle drawn around the towns of Muswellbrook and Scone, with Carly's remains located precisely within that area. Additionally, the map displayed the numbers 1, 2, and 3, which pointed to locations outside Muswellbrook. Senior Constable Mohini confirmed that the first 2 numbers indicated the positions of cameras. After police discovered Carly's remains in 2016, Sale called her father, Steve. In their conversation, He revealed that the skeleton found was missing hand bones, a detail that the police had not shared with the public. Only a small group, Carly's parents, the police, and the Department of Forensic Medicine at John Hunter Hospital, were aware of this information. Authorities suspected that Sale was aware of this detail because he had intimate knowledge of the crime scene and was responsible for leaving Carly's body there, which was discovered 2 years later. Additionally, the clothes found on Carly's remains were the same as those she wore when she disappeared, indicating that she likely died soon after leaving Andrew's house. The police were unable to locate her purse and phone. When they examined Sale's mobile phone, they found that he had deleted Google location data for the period between September 18 and October 2, 2014. During the trial, investigators discovered that a photo of Carly, taken by Sale while he was traveling to Musselbrook, had been edited and cropped before the police were notified of her disappearance. When the search for Carly started, Sale promised a $20,000 reward for information about her location, but his bank account indicated he was broke. This suggested that he made the offer knowing that no one would find her, so he wouldn't have to actually pay the reward. From the beginning, Sale also tried to involve himself in the police investigation to shift suspicion away from himself onto others. While police and emergency services were gathering information, Sale also searched the surrounding streets for security camera footage or witnesses. However, the police stated that this search Sales was not meant to gather information, but rather to cover up details and see if anyone had witnessed him met with Carly. As volunteers and police organized their search around Musselbrook and distributed Carly flyers, Sale was in Sydney texting friends about driving an Audi R8. He claimed to be very familiar with the area where Carly was discovered and even described it to her father, Steve, despite only having seen footage of a staged crime scene set up by the police. The images show a staged crime scene created by the police to observe Sale's reaction. As investigators conducted interviews, reviewed his Facebook messages, and listened to his phone calls, they found more evidence against him. They discovered that Sale had searched online for how to delete a Facebook account. Although his account remained active, Carly's account was deleted shortly afterward. Although the initial evidence was circumstantial, but the prosecutor noted that when the clues were put together, they started to form a clearer picture of the case. Ultimately, these pieces of evidence built a strong case that eliminated other explanations for Carly's disappearance and the discovery of her body, which was about 82 feet from the roadside. The judge determined that the motive behind the violent and impulsive attack on Carly was jealousy stemming from annoyance. After picking Carly up from Musselbrook, he learned that she had spent around 90 minutes with Andrew instead of with her daughter, as they had intended. Carly's daughter was not at home during that time, and the fact that Carly was alone with Andrew for an hour and a half led Sale to attack her in a fit of jealousy. Carly's mother, Lorraine, said at the sentencing hearing that she had spent the past 2 years filled with sadness and anxiety. She longed for her daughter, who was always full of life and loved to return home to her 2 young children. Unfortunately, she said that the next time she saw Carly was in the morgue, a day she described as the worst day of her life. Lorraine mentioned that Carly should be living her life with her children, her sister, her father, and her. She added that after that day, she never wanted to hear, speak, or see the man who took her beautiful daughter's life again, and that she refused to think about him anymore. Lorraine stated that she would miss Carly every second of every day for the rest of her life. Nearly 7 years after reporting Carly missing, 43-year-old Sale Newson was found guilty in December 2021. He received a sentence of 27 years in prison, with the possibility of parole in 2038. After the sentencing, Sale addressed the judge to reaffirm his innocence. Sale said that he understood the verdict had been issued. He addressed the judge, asserting that he was innocent, and from the day he reported Carly missing up to that moment, he had fully cooperated with the police, the courts, and the jails. He had been convicted of a crime he did not commit and that someone else was responsible for the crime, not him. Sale also said he now faces a huge challenge in proving his innocence in court. James, who assisted Sale in disposing of Carly's body, claimed he was not guilty. However, in July 2022, a jury convicted him. The judge stated that James had lied to police during 3 interrogations to provide a false alibi for Sale, and had deleted data from his phone to hide his actions. At the time he was charged in the Carly case, James was already incarcerated for illegal possession of weapons and prohibited substances. In November 2022, 31-year-old James Anthony Canine had little reaction when he was sentenced to 7.5 years in prison, followed by a 4-year parole period. After the trial, Carly's parents expressed that although justice was served, the verdict would never bring their daughter back.